Chapter 1491. Thank you. The lucky queen suddenly became shy. She felt that it was the best gift she had ever received in her life. It made the wedding meaningful. I wanted to have a Western-style wedding, but I've changed my mind. How am I supposed to send you the wedding photos? I don't think so, Jiang Pingji said frankly. However, even if there are no wedding photos, I think you're definitely a very beautiful girl. You'll be the most beautiful bride on your wedding day. Also, I have to apologize to you for what happened to Zixiao. His behavior just now was due to his cautiousness and his protection of me. If he offended you, please don't take it to heart and forgive him. The salted lucky queen blushed. She covered her face with her hands and said shyly, "Actually, it was my fault. I should be the one apologizing to Wei Ci. After all, that title was offensive to him. Nothing has happened yet, and I'm not hurt. Streamer, I realize that you're better than I thought. If not for the fact that you're a girl, I really want to replace the groom." The last sentence was what she wanted to say. The streamer was warm, flirtatious, handsome, beautiful and responsible. Fortunately, she was a girl. If she was a guy, she would really want to kick her fiancé. I've heard similar words many times before. Jiang Pingji laughed involuntarily. Fortunately, I can fight. Otherwise, I would have been beaten to death by the group. You don't have enough charm, but you still beat your rival in love. Isn't this indirectly admitting that you're inferior to your rival in love? The salted lucky queen shook her head. After a while, she changed the topic. I suddenly thought of something. Others will be jealous of you for giving me such a precious gift. Jiang Pingji glanced at the bullet screen in the streaming room and told the salted fish with a heavy expression. They're making a scene. All of them are envious, jealous, and hateful. Some even plan to send you a knife. The salted lucky queen was very optimistic. This is great. I can open a knife shop without having to purchase goods. Jiang Pingji had a very good impression of the optimistic salted fish. However, because of her identity, she could not pay too much attention to him. Jiang Pingji ordered someone to prepare a delicious meal for the salted fish. She calculated the time, and it was time to go back after she finished eating. The food in the army was not very good, but the salted fish European king still finished his meal. He returned to his own world with a set of accessories and gifts from his idols. Jiang Pingji didn't have the energy to care about how salted fish was doing at the moment. How is Shi Zhong's memory? Since he has a photographic memory, even if he doesn't have the blueprint, he should be able to write it down, right? Although they had recovered the blueprint, Shi Zhong had run back to the Nye camp. Leaving this person alive would ultimately be a scourge. You don't have to worry too much about this. Let's not talk about whether or not Shi Zhong can restore the contents of the blueprint. Even if he can, how long will it take to mass-produce them? Ci had just sent someone to interrogate the robber, and the robber confessed everything out of fear. He said that he had cut Shi Zhong's hand, cheek, collarbone, and shoulder. With such injuries, even if he didn't die, he would still be half dead. If the injuries were any deeper, it was difficult for him to even hold a brush. So how could he draw a fine picture? Jiang Pingji felt better after hearing that. On second thought, she was suddenly curious about Nie Liang's reaction. Shi Zhong, the chess piece, was completely useless. He went for wool and came home shorn. Even if Shi Zhong wasn't sent by Nie Liang, he was most likely very depressed. Just as Jiang Pingji had guessed, Nie Liang was indeed very depressed at the moment. If he hadn't restrained his temper, he would probably have flown into a rage. Wei Yong said apologetically, "I didn't do my job well. If I had been more cautious and sent someone to receive him earlier, perhaps." Nie Liang interrupted him and sighed in his heart. "Forget it. Even God is helping Lu Shi. What can we do?" Shi Zhong didn't meet anyone who was pursuing him along the way, but he just had to meet a robber when he was crossing the mountain. I have to say, maybe this is fate. When luck was good, everything went smoothly. When luck was bad, even a sip of herbal tea would get stuck in one's teeth. Wei Yong blamed himself incessantly. This matter was his fault. If he had been more cautious and sent someone to receive Shi Zhong, it might have been a different situation. Nie Liang asked again, "How is Shi Zhong's injury now?" He remembered that Zishun had said that Shi Zhong had a photographic memory. It didn't matter if the drawing was lost. He could still write it down if he was alive. Wei Yong sighed softly. Not very good. The military doctor said that his right hand was cut by a hatchet. He won't be able to write for a while. The wound on his cheek is too deep. His left eye can't be saved. The wound on his left shoulder has spread to his collarbone. It's not easy to heal, and it's very easy to rupture. It had to be said that it was a miracle that Shi Zhong could come back alive. He had the heart, but not the strength for other matters. Nie Liang was silent for a long time. However, the two of them didn't know Shi Zhong's determination to climb up. If he couldn't write with his right hand, he would use his left hand. If his left eye was blind, he would only keep his right eye open. If he couldn't move the wound on his shoulder, he would lie down and draw. He had endured humiliation for so many years before he finally got the perfect opportunity to be promoted. How could he give up halfway? In fact, during the years he was undercover in the woodworking workshop, he had thought of defecting. However, the idea didn't last long. After all, the woodworking workshop was a low-level government office. Even if Jiang Pengji attached great importance to it, the people inside almost didn't participate in politics. Zhang Ping, one of the three heads of the woodworking workshop, had worked there for 2 years, but that was because Jiang Pengji was short of talents. Zhang Ping and the others enjoyed excellent treatment, but they didn't have any real power. Or rather, the woodworking workshop was a department that didn't have any power. If Shi Zhong stayed there, no matter how hard he tried, he could only climb to the position of Zhang Ping and the others. Without real power, what was the point of having a high position? However, Shi Zhong was right-handed. He couldn't use his left hand to write. How could he draw exquisite and detailed drawings? He didn't make any progress for a few days. At that moment, Jiang Pingji had finished reorganizing. Several batches of supplies arrived one after another. It's not a solution to always be in a deadlock. We have to find a way to break through, Qi Guanrang said. Nie Liang refused to accept the challenge for several days. This is the 4th time he has put up a no-challenge sign. Even though Nie Liang had put up a no-challenge sign, Jiang Pingji could still fight if she wanted to. However, they were holed up in the camp. There were more than 200,000 troops in the camp. Jiang Pingji still had to defend Zhangjiang Pass. It was impossible for her to attack with all her might. Therefore, she could only watch helplessly when they put up a no-challenge sign. There are only 2 ways to deal with such a situation. First, find trouble with them. Second, if there's no trouble, then create trouble. Qi Guanrang glanced at his lord from the corner of his eyes. She was the one with the most crooked ideas. Someone suggested, "Why don't we try to lead the troops to attack at night?" Jiang Pingji said, 1,000 people to sneak attack a camp with more than 200,000 troops? If we can't hurt them, we can only let them have a good dream. This idea was too bad. However, let them have a good dream? Nie Liang was now a patient. He probably couldn't stand the torment. Bai Ning said, "I have an idea." Jiang Pingji said, "Tell me about it." Chapter 1492. Bai Ning wasn't the only one who wanted to make a contribution. The 5 million salted fish in the streaming room also wanted to join in. Pulsation activation. Come up with a plan to build up your character, and beg for an adventure called Dream of 1,000 Years. I want to be a top scholar. After searching for a long time, I suddenly saw the content of General Tian Dan of Qi setting up the Flaming Bull formation during the Warring States period. I think it's possible. Does the streamer want to get 1,000 bulls to give it a try? Tie a knife to the bull's horns, tie hay to their tails and ignite it, then charge at the enemy's camp. Tuta Feichio, save it, don't come up with a bad idea. If you want to use this idea to build up your character, I'm afraid you won't have any adventure in your next life. The big boss is a big boss. He has the demeanor of a master when he speaks. Guikai Guo Fengxiu. The Flaming Bull formation sounds awesome, but it's actually very unlikely. If I remember correctly, during the Civil War before the founding of the People's Republic, both parties tried the Flaming Bull formation, but it didn't work because the frightened bulls wouldn't charge at the enemy. Tie a knife to a bull's horn? Be careful not to stab your own people. The Flaming Bull formation? It's better to make a bull formation, it's more feasible. After all, animals can't understand human language, and it's impossible for them to obey orders like soldiers. Although there are records of the flaming bull formation in history, history can't be completely trusted. The practical difficulty has to be considered. If one plan doesn't work, another plan comes up. Shili Jiqiu. If the flaming bull formation doesn't work, then we can learn from Wife Chow and attack Crow's Nest at night in the classic Battle of Guandu. The streamer sends troops to attack their logistics granary. As long as they burn all their food, the battle will be easy. In Yuejia Zhugachinma. Hihi, do you know where Nieliang's logistics granary is? The salted fish are so eager to come up with a plan. Only because Jiang Pingji's gift to the lucky emperor made them collectively explode. That lucky emperor was extremely lucky. If he had the treatment of a 5 million lottery winner, the other lucky emperors only had $5 at most. It's infuriating to compare. The lucky emperor hasn't held a wedding yet, but he's already released his wedding photos online. He spent a high price to buy custom-made fabric and hired a professional tailor to customize his wedding dress. It's a perfect imitation of Lu Zhao's wedding dress. There are more than 20 pieces of headgear scattered. When he wears all of them and puts on his wedding dress and makeup, everyone is envious. The lucky king added another sentence. This will be a family heirloom in the future. It will be passed down to the daughter and not the son. I hope that the daughter in the future will also be beautiful. The European emperor posted a photo of the salted fish downstairs acknowledging his mother-in-law. Because of this lucky emperor's fortuitous encounter, the salted fish were even more enthusiastic about Dream of 1,000 Years. It was unknown who said that speaking more in the live broadcast room could increase the chance of winning a prize, but the number of bullet screens had doubled in the past few days. The salted fishes tried their best to come up with suggestions, but Jiang Pingji did not accept any of them. Bai Ning's suggestions were somewhat feasible. Everyone discussed and came up with a rough battle plan. As the saying goes, if the mountain is not me, then I will be the mountain. So what if Nieliang keeps hiding? Since a frontal battle during the day would not be able to inflict serious damage on them, they could only try to do so at night. Jiang Pingji had initially rejected the idea of attacking at night, but after Bai Ning's improvement, attacking at night was not a bad idea. As everyone knew, before Bai Ning followed Jiang Pingji, he was in the firecracker business. His ancestral skills were very reliable. Therefore, that night the Nye camp was still peaceful. The patrolling soldiers handed over their shifts as usual. The bonfire outside the camp occasionally made 1 or 2 crackles. Because Nieliang was not feeling well, Nye Qing took the initiative to take on the trivial military affairs. He tried his best to help his father share the burden. Occasionally, he would ask his father-in-law Wei Dan for help when there was something he did not understand. With Wei Dan's careful guidance, Nye Qing was a smart person who could understand with a little guidance. He quickly got the hang of it. He was busy, but Nye Yang was still idle. I really don't know what you're afraid of. Do you really not trust me? Nye Qing knew the reason why Nye Yang was unwilling to get involved in military affairs. It was because Nye Yang was the legitimate grandson of the third branch. Nye Liang, who was in power in the Nye family, was the eldest legitimate son of the fifth branch. Nye Yang was worried that if he got involved in too much military power, he would arouse Nye Liang's suspicion and dislike. After all, the internal conflicts in the Nye family were quite deep. Old Master Nye refused to admit his old age. Everyone felt that they were qualified to be in charge of the Nye family, so they disliked each other. Thinking of this, Nye Qing could not help but chuckle. Although he and Nye Yang were cousins, their relationship was better than that of real brothers. How could he be so suspicious of his own brother? Nye Yang lazily turned over. He said, "That's not it. This little brother is mediocre and untalented. It's better not to cause trouble for elder brother." Nye Qing moved the lamp closer and struggled to read through the scrolls with slightly sore eyes. When he finished processing a batch, he saw Nye Yang finish 2 plates of pastries from the corner of his eye. He shook his head helplessly. "Don't eat too much at night. It's easy to get indigestion and nausea. How old are you? You don't even notice this." Nye Qing was about to nag again. Nye Yang's heart thumped. He mentally prepared himself to be chanted. Nye Qing was good, but he was too involved. This made him feel uncomfortable. As they spoke, A burst of hurried footsteps came from outside the tent. Reporting, Nieching said. What is it? The messenger said. Enemy figures have been discovered in the southeast barracks. In an instant, the words night attack appeared in Nieching and Nieching's minds. Send orders everywhere to guard against the enemy. Nieching asked again, how many enemies are there? Of course, the messenger did not know. However, he was sure that the enemy was not large. There were no more than 1,000 of them. A night attack of 1,000 was not enough for the Nye camp, which had more than 200,000 soldiers. What can 1,000 men do? Not to mention that they were discovered by our army. Rather than saying it was a night attack, it's more like seeking death. Nye Yang pretended to analyze in surprise. He then guessed, elder brother, maybe the enemy has other troops. Are they trying to create a diversion? Even though he hated the system to the core, he had to admit that having such a thing was equivalent to having a clairvoyant and clairvoyant. According to the feedback from the system, the enemy had 3,000 men. They were split into 3 groups of 1,000 men each. The troop that the messenger reported might have been a fog bomb to attract their attention. The enemy still had a backup plan. Nieching said solemnly, this matter needs to be reported immediately. We cannot delay it. He had just stepped out of the tent when he noticed a fire burning in a certain direction. The enemy had attacked. Before he could finish thinking, there was a series of firecrackers exploding in another direction. As if to cater to these 2 changes, there was another ambush. The enemy shot hundreds of fire arrows into the Nye camp. When Wei Yong heard the news, he was so angry he almost cursed. What are the night patrols doing? How is it that the enemy is less than 50 zhang away from the camp without being discovered? The range of arrows was limited. Even the longer-range crossbows had to be close enough to shoot the fire arrows into the camp. Wei Yong wanted to vomit blood, but he did not discover them at such a close distance. The soldiers guarding the perimeter of the camp also felt wronged. Chapter 1493. Although it was called a night attack, it was actually a harassment from time to time. They would make a big fuss about an imminent attack, and when the enemy sent reinforcements, the soldiers would slip away quietly. What was this like? It was like a long foreplay was done, and there was a feeling, but it ended up withering. They did not just harass once, but 5 or 6 times in one night. It was not until the sky was faintly gray that the enemy returned home. That night, almost no one in the Nye camp could sleep well. It was not because of the large number of enemies, but because the enemy was too elusive. Every time they appeared, there would be no warning, and the moment they appeared, they would launch a wave of rockets. However, the people of the Nye camp did not dare to let down their guard. Who knew if this teasing would be real next time? The next day, the sky was bright, and rumors were flying among the soldiers. You slept like a log last night, and you don't know what happened. Lu Shi's army suddenly appeared out of thin air, and when we caught up, they disappeared again. Not long after, they appeared in another place. Could it be that these people are celestial soldiers and generals? That's strange. When the soldiers ate, they gathered together and whispered, not daring to speak loudly. The Nye camp was strict in managing the army, and any speech that shook the morale of the soldiers was not allowed. Once caught, the lightest punishment would be a lesson, and the heaviest punishment would be military law to warn others. No one disliked their long lives, and under normal circumstances, they did not dare to talk about it everywhere. However, what happened yesterday was too strange. While the soldiers were anxious, they urgently needed a sense of security from their comrades. So there were soldiers whispering about it everywhere. Maybe they really are celestial soldiers and generals. I just heard someone say that they saw them flying down from the sky with their own eyes. No, they clearly came out from the ground. I heard that Lu Shi's men are all ghost soldiers. Rumors always became more and more exaggerated as they spread. With each additional person, the rumor would become less true. At first, people were still talking about the strange appearance of the enemy last night. But as the rumors spread, it became that the enemy flew down from the sky, drilled out from the ground, and the enemy who attacked at night were all ghost soldiers. What was even more amazing was that there were actually a few people who swore that they saw it with their own eyes. Not only did some people see it with their own eyes, But some people also found supporting evidence. If Lu Shi wasn't the King Yinluo of hell, why would she be so bloodthirsty? I heard that every time she returned from a great victory, she would have thousands of human ears strung around her waist and human heads on her horse's back. Every day, she drinks human blood and eats human flesh. Wherever she goes, she kills. Isn't she a living Hades? No, it's not King Yinluo. It's most likely a general in the sky. Say, the last time the Lord went to burn Zhanjiang Pass, the fire was clearly so big that it couldn't be put out. But the heavens actually rained. It's most likely a general who went to look for the Dragon King. That's why it rained. Some said that Jiang Pingji was a general with a powerful background in the heavenly palace, while others said that she was a Rakshasa demon from hell. Otherwise, why would the enemy appear without a sound last night and leave without a trace? Who in this world could do this? It was either a god or a ghost. At noon, these messy rumors reached Nieliang's ears, and Wei Yong and the others all apologized. They also dealt with the few who spread the worst rumors and managed to suppress the signs. But it was better to disperse them than to stop them. The more they suppressed them, the more anxious the soldiers became. Nieliang could see it clearly. No matter how Jiang Pingji approached them quietly, the enemy's purpose of the night attack was nothing more than to force him to fight. Send someone to pay attention. She will come again tonight. Tell the soldiers not to be careless. The enemy was obviously harassing them and would not give up until they achieved their goal. Wei Yong and the others agreed, but they were a little worried. No matter how the low-level soldiers spread rumors, it indirectly proved one thing. The enemy was indeed elusive. If they did not think of a way to expose the enemy's tricks, the rumors would only become more and more intense, which was extremely disadvantageous to them. It turned out that the celestial soldiers and ghost generals were all fake. The real reason for their elusive appearance was disguise. During the sneak attack last night, there was only a small crescent moon in the sky, and it was even covered by dark clouds. The soldiers wore an ancient version of a ghillie suit for camouflage. Their exposed skin was smeared with charcoal, and they basically blended in with the night. Because of insufficient nutrition, the ancient soldiers had an extremely high rate of night blindness. Even if they did not have night blindness, they more or less had other problems. It was difficult for the soldiers standing on the watchtower to discover the small movements in the distance, let alone to warn them in advance. This was the real reason why Jiang Pingji's soldiers were elusive. In the middle of the night, Jiang Pingji sent people to sneak attack again. This time, the number of troops was greater than the previous night. She was eager to let the entire enemy camp know. There was a hot-tempered general in Nieliang's tent, and he directly asked for the order to send troops. When he went out and chased for a mile, there was not even a shadow of the enemy. At that moment, there was the sound of firecrackers exploding in another place. The loud noise could be heard from afar. Jiang Pingji squatted in the distance and watched the movement. She asked Bai Ning, "General Bai's ancestors ran a firecracker business?" Bai Ning did not feel ashamed. "It's an old skill passed down from my ancestors. Unfortunately, in troubled times, the people can't even feed themselves. How can they have the mood to play with these things?" Because the ancestral business could not continue, Bai Ning could only find another way out. His daughter also had to get married. He had to climb a little higher in order to find a husband of a higher level for her. Jiang Pingji asked, "General Bai, do you have any thoughts?" Bai Ning was dumbfounded. What thoughts could he have? Could it be that the Lord was asking about his employment intentions after retirement? After the troubled times end, I can't carry a sword anymore. Maybe I'll pick up my old profession. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "I'm not asking about that. I'm asking General Bai, you have this skill. Why didn't you think of continuing to study it?" Bai Ning was puzzled. What's the use of studying firecrackers? The people can't afford them. Jiang Pingji was helpless. She guided him and said, "Can a piece of firecracker blow up a clay pot?" Bai Ning nodded affirmatively. "Yes." She asked again, "If 100 pieces of firecrackers are gathered together, won't it be more powerful? Maybe it can even blow up the city gate." Bai Ning was speechless. This was something that would make people happy during the new year. Did his lord only think about killing people and fighting wars? Let's set off firecrackers. That's possible. But the battlefield is chaotic. The enemy's rockets ignite the firecrackers first. Won't they blow up our own people? If 100 pieces of firecrackers were gathered together, the volume would be huge. The target would be too obvious. The feasibility was very low. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "Then let's change our thinking. If after studying it, the power of a piece of firecracker can match up to 100 pieces, what do you think?" Bai Ning was silent for a while. He felt that his lord was indulging in fantasy. How could the power of a piece of firecracker be compared to 100 pieces? Was it possible to compress hundreds of parts of sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal into one? More than 200 years ago, firecrackers only burned bamboo. Later, people discovered the magical effects of sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal. They simply filled these things in a bamboo tube, according to a certain proportion, and burned them. They were also called firecrackers. Bai Ning's ancestral skill, to put it bluntly, was a proportional formula. If firecrackers were made according to this formula, the explosion would be loud, and the production process would be less prone to accidents. My lord's idea is interesting. Chapter 1494. Jiang Pingji could also see that Bai Ning did not take this matter to heart at all. However, this reaction was normal. After all, in Bai Ning's mind, firecrackers were toys that children played with during the new year. If such a toy could really play a role on the battlefield, it would be as ridiculous as someone telling Jiang Pingji that a child's toy gun could destroy a planet with one shot. Besides, firecrackers were so capable, why hadn't the ancestors discovered it? She smiled and said, "Interesting ideas are the key to innovation. How can you climb higher if you blindly believe in the things of the predecessors? So what if it was whimsical? Since ancient times, how many epic-making inventions had not been derived from whimsical ideas?" Bai Ning secretly shook his head when he heard this. Sometimes he wondered what kind of person the lord he followed was. She had the ambition to pacify the world and end the chaos. She should be a broad-minded leader who cared about the people's livelihood. In this aspect, she did a good job. No, it should be said that she did a good job in every aspect, so much so that people had doubts about her identity. Was she a simple politician, a wise monarch, a brave general, or a whimsical Maha's child? No matter which identity it was, Bai Ning could not feel a trace of disgust or disgust. Instead, he would be led by the nose by her thoughts. If my lord finds it interesting, you might as well send someone to try it out. I have a pen passed down from my ancestors and my family. Maybe it will come in handy. Bai Ning was not optimistic in his heart, but he would not directly refute her on the surface. Instead, he would go along with her wishes. After all, he was a feudal lord who had power over the world. Naturally, he had the right to whimsical ideas. Whatever she wanted to do, there would always be people who would be willing to sacrifice their lives for her, put it into practice for her, and please her. Jiang Pingji shook her head. It's not necessary at the moment. Let's wait until the world is pacified. Even the most primitive explosives were subversive to the changes in the form of war in this era. Jiang Pingji did not want to create another Shi Zhong, who stole secrets. This kind of weapon should be used only when she had the ability to protect it to prevent it from falling into the hands of other forces. Bai Ning nodded and said no more. Jiang Pingji said, "Maybe I should talk to Yuexia about this. She will most likely be very interested." Bai Ning laughed. That's true. Yuexia's favorite thing to do is to make the impossible possible. She's too competitive. As a father, how could Bai Ning not know that his daughter, Bai Yuexia, had suffered discrimination and verbal abuse because of the birthmark on her face? When she had just reached adulthood, there were a few Icemen who came to propose marriage. However, the ones who proposed were all local hooligans and scoundrels. One of them was even an old widower, who was over 70 years old. Although he was old, his heart was not old. Bai Ning was furious, and Bai Yuexia was so angry that she chased Icemen out. Some Icemen ran away with their tails between their legs, and some Icemen had a hot and sharp temper. They directly said that Bai Yuexia was ugly, and marrying a rascal with such a condition would be too much. After this village, even if she wanted to marry in the future, she wouldn't be able to get married in this lifetime. "Father, If my future husband isn't a hero that I like, I'd rather comb my hair and be a widow for the rest of my life than marry. His daughter had such a fiery temper. As a father, what else could Bai Ning do other than protect her? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, if one day I can conquer the world and establish a country, Yuexia's achievements will definitely be above yours. Bai Ning was elated when he heard that. What did this mean? It meant that the Lord didn't mind Bai Yuexia's crime of not guarding well at all. Not only did she not intend to punish her, but she also wanted to put her in an important position. He was overjoyed in his heart, but he put on a serious expression on his face. Yuexia is just a girl in the boudoir. How would I dare to think so much? As soon as he said that, Bai Ning couldn't help but slap himself in his heart. How could he say that? Didn't he see that his lord was also a woman? I'm also a woman, but I also dare to think about the whole world. Jiang Pengji didn't blame him for being the stupidest. She smiled and said, the words male and female are just to distinguish between genders. It doesn't represent an individual's ability. Belittling someone because of their gender, you're not qualified as a father. Bai Ning smiled sheepishly and echoed, you're right, my lord. I will pay attention in the future. While they were talking, the troops who launched sneak attacks and harassed them had already stirred up trouble everywhere in the Nye camp, making them restless for the whole night. Jiang Pengji said, if this goes on, I don't think the possibility of Nye Liang sending his troops is high. That person is very patient. When Bai Ning heard that the topic was back to business, he immediately said seriously, it doesn't matter if he doesn't send his troops. We'll continue to cause trouble. If he's not afraid of the morale of the troops collapsing, then we'll continue to endure. 1,000-year tortoise, a 10,000-year tortoise. If he can really endure anything, I'll admire him. If they didn't fight and just harassed them, sooner or later, they would break down. All the soldiers in the Nye camp were living people made of flesh and blood. They weren't dead people who didn't eat or drink. It was fine if they didn't sleep well for 1 or 2 days, but if they were like this for several days in a row, it would only be a matter of time before they became mentally exhausted, and their combat power would decline. Moreover, if they harass them too much, they'll know that our army is bluffing. They'll inevitably let down their guard. Bai Ning had a good grasp of this. Although he didn't have much experience in leading troops, when he was in his hometown in Nansheng, he was still the head of the local militia. He relied on various tactics to protect the land from foreign enemies. No matter how cautious Nye Liang is and how patient he is, the soldiers under him are just fools. Nye Liang could maintain a high level of vigilance from beginning to end, but the soldiers under him couldn't. There were too many stories about the wolf coming. When the wolf really came, people would not believe it anymore. Bai Ning didn't know the story of the wolf is coming, but he knew how to wear down the enemy's vigilance bit by bit. Jiang Pengji said, I'm just afraid that we'll repeat the same trick too many times and be seen through. No matter how stupid the enemy was, they couldn't fall into the same trap repeatedly. Bai Ning seriously considered this problem. He decided to attack the Nye camp the night after tomorrow. After harassing the enemy camp for 3 consecutive nights, the enemy would be mentally exhausted. The 4th night attack would definitely be effective. The next day, Jiang Pengji came over to challenge them as usual. Nye Eng and the others were about to go crazy with anger. Fan Chen said angrily, what's wrong with Lu Shi? She's causing trouble in the middle of the night, and causing trouble in the day. Does she have too much energy and nowhere to vent it? Attacking at night did not let them sleep, and challenging them in the day did not let them have a good rest. Wei Yong said, it's obvious that she's forcing us to fight. Fan Chen said, let's fight then. Are we afraid of her? Although Nye Qing was still young, he knew his father's considerations and volunteered to hold the fort. Nye Liang frowned and thought for a while, then said, if that's the case, then let's send them away. He didn't want to fight not only because of his health, but also because Jiang Pengji was too strange. The consecutive coincidences had shaken the morale of the army. Before finding the perfect opportunity, Nye Liang didn't want to take the risk and let Jiang Pengji take advantage of him. Chapter 1495. Hey, they're finally willing to come out. I thought they secretly escaped. He had challenged them for so many days, but they didn't respond. He thought they would stand him up that day. He didn't expect to be surprised. You don't know. A tortoise's head has been in its shell for a long time. Doesn't it need to come out to look for food? The soldiers around him roared with laughter. Their mocking malice was written all over their faces. The general's voice wasn't soft, but the two armies were separated by a long distance. They could only vaguely hear a little movement. Even if they didn't hear it clearly, they knew it wouldn't be pleasant just by looking at how the enemy was laughing. Jiang Pingji yawned while riding on the horse. She said in a bored tone, "Is this another sign of a general duel?" She really didn't understand the etiquette of ancient battles. It was fine if the two armies didn't kill the envoys, but there was a general duel. In her opinion, while the Nya army's formation was unstable, she could directly lead her troops to attack. A general duel would give the enemy time to prepare. Of course, a general duel was not very frequent. It was generally limited to the battlefield. According to the current situation of war, there might not be a general duel in 100 or 200 years. Bai Ning volunteered to go. Jiang Pingji waved her hand and gestured for him to go. "I'll hold the line for you." She wasn't bragging, but she had never lost a one-on-one in this world. There's another reward for killing the enemy's general in front of the battle. Bai Ning cupped his hands and accepted the order. He spurred his horse forward. The general from the Nya army was Bai Ning, who was over 40 years old. His hair and beard were already white. He was contemptuous and angry at the same time. Could it be that Jiang Pingji had no capable generals under her command, and had only sent an old and weak general? It's good that Lu Shi is so contemptuous. I'll go meet him. There were many generals in the Nya army. Many of them were from Zhongzhao's military families. They had practiced martial arts since they were young, and were very brave. Except for a few experienced veterans, most of them were between 25 and 40 years old. They were in their prime. Is there no one else in Lu Shi's camp? He actually sent such an old man. He's obviously here to die. Who are you? Tell me your name. My blade does not behead a nameless person. The two of them were dozens of feet apart, but his voice was like thunder, and every word could be heard clearly. The newcomer was tall and sturdy, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. His arms were as thick as an ordinary woman's thighs. His muscles were solid, and he stood out from the crowd. His attire was quite stylish, and one could tell at a glance that he was a high-ranking general in Nie Ying's army. A full set of armor made of fine iron. The armor was painted with ferocious and frightening beasts. Just by standing there, this person gave people a chilling feeling. In his hand was a long saber that was 3 meters long. The edge of the saber was cold and intimidating. The horse he was riding on wasn't small, but when this general rode on it, the warhorse seemed petite. In the face of such humiliation, Bai Ning laughed in anger. Such big words. Aren't you afraid that the wind will cut your tongue? If you still want your father's life, get off your horse, kneel down and call me father. Hearing Bai Ning refer to himself as his father, General Nie Ying's chest burned with anger. He raised his sword and urged his horse forward. In a single exchange, both of them used their full strength. The strength was so great that the hand between his thumb and forefinger felt numb. The general was shocked. He was surprised by Bai Ning's strength. He was clearly an old man whose health was declining, but his strength was not inferior to that of a young man. That was because although Bai Ning was old, his physical condition was maintained very well. Before he joined Jiang Pingji's side, he had even killed a man-eating female worm with his bare hands. It was not a good habit to judge people by their appearance. Bai Ning felt that he could still fight for more than 10 years. Oh, my son is not an embroidered pillow. I am very relieved. Bai Ning took advantage of his age and called the other party his son. He urged his horse to fight while he was talking nonsense to disturb the other party's condition. Young man, let me teach you a good lesson. Warriors born into a family of generals had advantages, but also certain disadvantages. The advantage was that they could receive formal and systematic education from a young age. They were far from those generals born into the wilderness who only had brute force. The disadvantages were also obvious. No matter how crude a scolding fight was, it could not be compared to an unorthodox one. Bai Ning's martial arts and military tactics were taught by Gu Chun, the former Huban general of Nansheng. Although it was not considered unorthodox, it was indeed not orthodox. He could not guarantee that he would win in a fight, but he definitely could not lose in a scolding fight. The general wanted to deal with the enemy carefully, but the more Bai Ning talked, the angrier he became. In the end, he could not hold it in anymore. "You're courting death." With a loud shout, he attacked Bai Ning's face with his long knife. Bai Ning seemed to have expected it. He blocked the attack with his weapon and bent over to avoid it. The two of them fought for more than 10 rounds. Their foreheads, which were wrapped in armor, were dripping with sweat. The clothes inside the armor were wet with hot sweat. Sun Wen frowned and asked Jiang Pengji, "Can you tell who has the upper hand, my lord?" Jiang Pengji said, "Of course it's General Bai Ning. He is more experienced and knows how to preserve his strength and wait for an opportunity to strike. Nie Ying is a good general, but he is young and arrogant. It's inevitable that he will be arrogant. In another 10 rounds, the outcome will be more or less decided." As she spoke, the situation in front of the army was as she expected. General Nie Ying's experience was not as good as Bai Ning's. He was deceived and revealed a flaw. His shoulder was cut. While he was in pain, he made a feint. While Bai Ning was dodging, he urged his horse to rush back to his army. Of course, Bai Ning did not want to lose the military merit that was already in his mouth. He hurriedly urged his horse to catch up. He caught a glimpse of a cold reflection from the corner of his eye. He thought to himself, "This is bad. Is Nie Jun trying to shoot an arrow from the back in broad daylight?" Bai Ning was vigilant as he caught up with his opponent. He raised his knife and cut him in half. The enemy did not even have the chance to scream before he fell off his horse. In the blink of an eye, the arrow was already in front of him. Bai Ning dodged sideways. The arrow pierced through his arm. He immediately rushed back to his camp. At the same time, Nie Qing's face darkened. He did not know whether to reprimand the general who lost his life due to carelessness, or to reprimand the young general who shot an arrow from the back. Life and death were not important in a battle between generals. People would only look down on those dirty tricks that could not be seen in the light. It was fine to shoot an arrow from the back, but not only did he not save his own general, he even let the enemy escape successfully. It was even more humiliating. When Qin Gong saw that Bai Ning had returned, his stern face was filled with anger. "Is General Bai all right? What haven't I seen before?" Bai Ning grinned. "It's just an arrow from the back. I suffered some flesh wounds. It's a pity that my head is gone." Killing an enemy general in front of a battle was a great merit. As a trophy, the other party's head was his. Qin Gong did not know whether to laugh or cry. At that moment, he was still concerned about the enemy general's head. General Bai really did not know what to say. Chapter 1496. Bai Ning coughed softly and didn't dare to talk back. He could only listen to his lord's reprimand. Sun Wen came out to smooth things over and appease his lord, lest she get angry and take the initiative to fight. Jiang Pingji fought alone in the battle of the northern borderline, which still left an indelible psychological shadow in Sun Wen's heart. At that moment, another general came out from Nie Ying's side. The general who had been cut in half had been picked up by the soldiers to collect his body. Qin Gong volunteered to fight. "Why are you here? Tell that old man to come out and die." Qin Gong was very good-looking. His only flaw was a long scar on the right side of his face. The location of the scar was very close to his right eye. The scar was left by an arrow when Han Yu ambushed him at Sanshan Valley. If the location was a little more off, it would have either pierced through his brain or blinded his right eye. Who would have thought that one day, Han Yu would become a comrade in the same camp as them? You guys are so shameless. Not only did you sneak an arrow in the dark, but you even said that you want to fight with the injured General Bai. Qin Gong said coldly. A big knife stood in front of him. He said, "If you want to find General Bai, you have to go through me. I'm afraid you won't be able to." As mentioned earlier, most of the generals in Nie Ying's tent came from families of generals. Unlike Dongqing, which valued literature and restrained martial arts, Zhongzhou was full of martial arts. There were many families of generals, and each of them was a big family. The unlucky guy who had been killed by Bai Ning was a cousin of the general in front of him, similar to Xie Zhe and Li Yun. The two had a good relationship in private. He couldn't bear to see his cousin being hunted down and cut in half at the waist. The sound of the war drums resounded in the sky. Qin Gong didn't talk nonsense and went forward to fight. Good timing. I'll take your head. Jiang Pingji continued to watch the battle and yawned. White snorted in dissatisfaction. Both the human and the horse were very unhappy. Sun Wen saw her like this and took the initiative to start a conversation. He couldn't let his lord continue yawning. Such a lazy and inattentive look would be seen as not taking them seriously in the eyes of the generals who risked their lives for her. Qin Gong was fighting with his life on the front line, and his lord was squatting in the back, yawning and squeezing tears. Lord, do you think General Qin has a chance of winning? Jiang Pingji said. Of course we have a chance of winning, but overall, the enemy has a slight advantage. Suddenly my eyes turned red. Zhongzhou is indeed a place where outstanding people are born. The Nie family is also a wealthy family among the wealthy. Any general you can pick out is capable. When watching a general fight, the first thing to look at was his aura, figure, and muscles. The poor study literature, the rich practice martial arts. Although books were very expensive in this era, the cost of training a qualified general was no less than that of training a great scholar. To be a general, not only did he need to have an excellent body and talent, he also needed to study military books, buy all kinds of equipment, and take care of his body was also a huge expense. Fish and meat could not be missed. How could a martial artist be so strong when he had to eat plain vegetables and porridge all day long? If his muscles and bones were damaged, he would need to use herbs to nurse them back to health. How could an ordinary family provide these conditions? There were some boorish men who were born with divine strength, who climbed up by relying on their strength, but their height was limited, and they could not become generals. Among the generals under Jiang Pingji, except for Dian Yan, who came from a grassroots background, which one of the others did not have a certain background. Meng Hun first followed the Meng family in Sangzhou, and was a general of the Meng family. He suffered when he was young, but after he climbed up, the resources came. Luo Yu was the coach of the Imperial Guards in Dongqing, and his family also had a background. Li Yin grew up with Xie Qian. No matter how hard Xie Qian lived, how could he let his son lack resources? Fu Wang was a boorish man who grew up in a pack of wolves. He followed his adoptive father, Fu Yang, when he was young, and could be considered half a son of a general. Xie Zhe was born in the Xie family, and Qin Gong's father's family had worked hard for the Su family for generations. Both of them were good seedlings. When Jiang Nongqin first learned martial arts, Jiang Pingji invested a lot. After Jiang Pingji's power stabilized, she promoted many young generals, but they were still inexperienced and could not compare to the children of a general. Counting the generals under her command, there were not many who were trained by herself. Those who could be used were basically ready-made ones from other families. I'm so envious. The rich Nie family did not have to spend much effort to recruit so many good seedlings. It was infuriating to compare. Sun Wen said with a smile, My lord, you alone are equivalent to 100 people. If anyone is envious, it's them who are envious of us. Jiang Pingji asked him in return, Does that mean Zidao allowed me to fight? Sun Wen was speechless. No, he did not say that. Don't accuse me wrongly. While they were talking, General Nie had already tricked Qin Gong. He noticed that Qin Gong was making some unnatural movements because of his right eye. This small movement could not be noticed if one was not careful. But he noticed it, and used it to attack the right side of Qin Gong's face. It was a feint. Qin Gong subconsciously thought of the stray arrow in the Valley of the Three Mountains. When he dodged, it was slightly to the side. He did not notice that the enemy had taken out 2 metal balls from his waist. He saw the enemy's fingers flip, and the 2 metal balls flew out. They happened to be out of Qin Gong's sight. Jiang Pingji did not wait for Sun Wen to deny it. She gave an order, and White rushed out excitedly. She unsheathed her long sword and forced the enemy to retreat. She reached out with her left arm and caught Qin Gong, who had almost fallen off his horse. I'll fight. You go down. Jiang Pingji was dressed in men's clothing. Her face was painted with a darker color of makeup. She looked like a slightly thin and weak youth. Qin Gong steadied himself. Just as he was about to say something, his lord rushed toward the enemy. So thin and small. Did Lu Shi run out of military rations? A general should have broad shoulders, strong muscles, and one arm should be the size of a man's thigh. Jiang Pingji was as thin as a woman. Looking at her pitiful appearance, he suspected that she had been dragged over to take the blame without eating breakfast. Get someone else to do it. It's either old or young. Why is Lu Shi's camp filled with a motley crew? Jiang Pingji's face darkened. Behind her, the 5 million salted fish who were cheering for her felt sympathy for the unknown general. I know the Nye family is rich, but you said that I'm poor. I'm not willing. Was she poor? Since she robbed Tao's family clean, she didn't know that she was poor. The enemy sneered, but he could not laugh anymore. Jiang Pingji looked like a thin scholar, but she was shockingly strong. The horse under the enemy's crotch let out a neigh, unable to bear the burden. Not only that, but White also bullied the horse. Relying on its huge size, it knocked the enemy's horse until it could not stand steadily. Seeing the situation, the enemy knew that he could not gain the upper hand, so he tried to trick Jiang Pingji. Unexpectedly, Jiang Pingji did not chase after him. When she saw the enemy turn to escape, she took the horse noose and wrapped it around his neck. She forcefully pulled him off the horse. Do you think I'm stupid? White, trample him to death. Chapter 1497. Wu Hanyu. Familiar formula, familiar taste, familiar violence from the familiar streamer. Shui Di. White is a streamer among horses. He's just as violent. He crushed a person's skull with his hoof. Bayamo Chuchu. I only have one question. Why did the streamer just praise the Nye family for being wealthy, and the people of Zhongzhou? Why did she suddenly kill someone in the next second? Shouldn't the normal scenario be to defeat them, and leave an indelible psychological trauma in their hearts? Then one day, she can get rid of the Nye family and smoothly pick up other families? If the streamer kills someone now, won't there be one less overtime team in the future? Fu Rong Gugu. You guys don't understand. The Nye family is a legitimate wealthy family. The streamer doesn't feel bad about the death of a few generals. Anyway, there are a series of little white rabbits waiting for her to conquer. If she doesn't kill all those she doesn't like, how will she recruit those she likes in the future? After so many years, the salted fish are used to all kinds of violent and bloody scenes. They can even survive the most disgusting burning of 1,000 corpses. What's the big deal about a pair of hooves crushing someone's skull? What kind of broken limbs and remains haven't been seen in a chaotic battle between two armies? Jiang Pingji flicked her wrist and flung the miserable corpse of the enemy general more than 10 feet away. She calmly rode on the back of the horse. You've gone too far. 2 of the Nye army's generals were killed. While their morale plummeted, some people were so angry that they disregarded the obstruction and ran out on horseback. Jiang Pingji laughed. Are you here to die too? Don't. It wasn't easy for your parents to raise a good-for-nothing like you. Look at you. You have a family and a wife and concubines. If you die in my hands, I'll indirectly kill many people. She didn't curse like Bai Ning, but she was very sarcastic. The enemy general was already very angry. At that moment his veins were bulging. Die! She only heard the other party shout loudly, carrying a pair of heavy-looking double broad axes, and rushing towards her. The enemy general looked like a power-type player who specialized in strength. Jiang Pingji knew the enemy's strength was almost double that of the good-for-nothing she had just fought. If this kind of brute force was used by an ordinary person, it would be enough to be regarded as an innate god. Jiang Pingji easily withstood the attack, but White was not used to it. It angrily rammed into the enemy horse that had provoked it. Although White had taken a few maternity leave in the past few years, and had become the mother of a few cubs, its temper had not improved at all. Instead, it had become even more violent and vicious. Apart from its owner, Jiang Pingji, even its stableman and husband Little White, who had been taking care of it all year round, would be scolded in the face if it got too close. Yo, your strength is not bad. What a pity. Are your axes made of mud? After Jiang Pingji got her hands on the god-slaying saber, She was no longer interested in other weapons. In her era, the god-slaying saber was a weapon of war at the top of the pyramid. In the current era, it was a true divine weapon. The strength of the clash just now was extremely great. Dao's blade had directly caught the other party's axe blades, leaving 2 clear cuts on the other party's axe blades. When the enemy general heard this, he was extremely angry. When he saw the mark on the axe, only fear remained in his heart. You still have the time to be in a daze on the battlefield. If you don't go to the Yellow Springs Road, who will? The corners of Jiang Pingji's mouth curled up. She had a relaxed attitude. She did not care about the battle at all, because it was impossible for her to lose. If she lost, she would immediately bring the keyboard over and kneel in front of the old chief to prevent herself from making a fool of herself. At the same time, Nie Qing brought Nie Yang to the front to lecture him. However, due to the battlefield, Nie Qing could not be too harsh with his words. Nie Yang also knew that his arrow was too rash, so he did not dare to defend himself. He knew Nie Qing too well. He was soft-hearted and kind. If he remained silent and let Nie Qing say a few words, he would calm down in no time. Nie Yang was about to daydream when he heard the system's voice. He never knew that the system could be nervous and fearful. It was as if it had met a terrifying natural enemy. It's Lu Shi. Nie Yang's lazy eyes showed some surprise. He asked the system in his heart, Lu Shi? What Lu Shi? The system's next words almost broke Nie Yang's expression. The person fighting on the battlefield is Lu Shi, and the knife in his hand. It can't be wrong. This knife. Nie Yang, no matter what, you have to take that knife. Lu Shi cannot be left alive. Nie Yang secretly glanced at Jiang Pingji, who was playing with him. He could not suppress the shock in his heart. Isn't she a feudal lord? Nie Yang had heard of Jiang Pingji's bravery in battle in Zhongzhou, but he had never taken the rumors to heart. The son of a rich family did not sit under the eaves. The son of a rich family did not ride a horse. The sacred lord did not take advantage of danger to be lucky. If even these initiating children knew, how could a feudal lord not know? If he were to fight on the battlefield, he would either die or be injured. If something happened to him, wouldn't his enemies laugh their heads off? Therefore, Nie Yang always thought that the rumors were spread by Jiang Pingji herself to exaggerate her bravery and achievements. This kind of marketing method could be found everywhere in history. In order to show off their talents, some people would boast about their achievements. They had to cheat and brag about their political and military achievements in order to be seen by others. How could an ordinary and mediocre ruler become an eternal emperor? It was enough to have a strong marketing team and a face as thick as the corner of a city wall. One word was boasting. Obviously, Jiang Pingji was not such a fake person. She even told the truth about the number of troops she had deployed to the front lines, let alone other places. Fake. She was disdainful because the speed at which others boasted was slower than her own speed. The system responded to Nie Yang's question. Who knows what kind of person she is? The sword in her hand gives me an ominous feeling. The system had split from the main body a long time ago, so it did not know a lot of information. However, it was well aware of what the god-slaying sword was used for. At that moment, such a sword appeared in the hands of a mortal whom it could not see through. It felt somewhat uneasy. Nie Yang raised his eyebrows. So this monster was afraid of that sword? He could not help but plot in his heart. But now was not a good time to do so. Brother, there is something. I must say. Nie Yang pretended to be pitiful, and Nie Qing's heart softened. Nie Qing asked him, what is it? Nie Yang leaned close to his ear and whispered, the person fighting on the front lines is Lu Shi. What? Nie Qing was so shocked that he almost lost his composure. The commotion attracted the attention of the supervising guards. He could not care about that and hurriedly asked, is it true? Nie Yang said, there is a portrait of a painter in my residence. When I saw the young general just now, I thought he looked familiar. After careful observation, I realized that it was very likely to be Lu Shi. Everyone knows that Lu Shi has a long sword in his hand. The shape is exactly the same as in the portrait. Hearing the commotion, the guards were astonished. They rode their horses to the front of the formation to take a closer look. Chapter 1498. Wei Yong had seen Jiang Pingji before, but that was a few years ago. They had only met briefly a few times. When supervising the battle, Wei Yong's position was some distance away from the front line. He did not realize Jiang Pingji's identity, but Nie Yang did. Since he recognized her, there was no reason to miss the opportunity. Wei Yong gave the general beside him a look. The general understood, and immediately rushed out of the battle formation. Jiang Pingji had played enough. She was about to cut off the enemy's head when a gust of wind came from her side. General Lin, I will help you. The salted fishes were in an uproar. How shameless. 2 against 1. Cutie Xiaoming Xian. Motherf asterisk Ker 2 against 1. 2 strong men against a weak woman. How shameless are they? The Nia army is so capable. Why don't they send another one, to make up a lineup of 3 heroes fighting Lubu? Streamer, retreat if you can't handle it. Don't fight them. The salted fishes were in an uproar. They saw the bullet screen and laughed. Cutie Xiaoming Xian was indeed not aware of how good their streamer was at fighting. The 2 generals attacked from the left and right. They cooperated very well, and slowly lured Jiang Pingji to a position close to the Nia army. Jiang Pingji had eaten more salt than they had walked. How could she not realize it? Did they really think she was a boar who had lost her mind, because she was addicted to fighting? Not to mention how strong her perception of danger was, she had a spiritual realm. Threats within the realm were useless against her. Old Master Sun Wen was worried from beginning to end. He felt that something was wrong when he saw the enemy general trying to lure Jiang Pingji to the other side. Qin Gong said, Counselor, shall I support the Lord? Looking at their formation, I'm afraid there is an ambush in the dark. Sun Wen said solemnly, I'm afraid the Lord's identity has been exposed. Qin Gong heard this. If the Lord was killed by the enemy's arrows in front of the battle formation, they could commit suicide to apologize. I'll go now. Qin Gong pulled the reins tightly, and was about to urge the horse out of the battle formation when the situation changed again. Jiang Pingji's strength was not inferior to the 2 of them, which shocked the 2 generals. What made them even more frightened was that Jiang Pingji actually chuckled in a voice that only the 3 of them could hear. Do you really think that I don't know how many bastards are hiding in the dark and shooting arrows? You know, knowing this, he still followed the 2 of them into the trap. How arrogant was this person? Jiang Pingji yelled. Mere mortals want to fight against destiny. You overestimate yourself. When the idle people heard what Jiang Pingji said, the bullet screen was in an uproar. Guikai Guo Fengxiu. Everyone get out of the way. The streamer is ready to show off. The bullet screen was like a command. Hundreds of arrows flew out from the Nia army's formation. Their target was only Jiang Pingji. When Sun Wen, Qin Gong, Bai Ning, and the others saw this scene, they felt like their guts were about to explode. Only Jiang Pingji stood on her horse and sneered. Master! No matter how fast Qin Gong was, he couldn't make it in time. In a moment of desperation, he shouted out her identity. In the blink of an eye, the rain of arrows had fallen. Jiang Pingji calmly beheaded 2 of the enemy's generals. A visible ripple spread out with her as the center. In the next second, a miraculous scene appeared, causing Qin Gong to swallow the words he was about to say. The ripples in the water had a touch of gold, and the momentum of the hundreds of arrows was greatly reduced. They stopped 5 feet away from Jiang Pingji. Did time stop? Jiang Pingji sneered and glanced in a certain direction of the enemy. Nie Yang felt cold from her stare. He didn't know why, but he had a hunch that Jiang Pingji was looking at him. System, is she human? The arrogant system was terrified. It was as quiet as a chicken. Nie Yang suspected that Jiang Pingji was looking at him, but the system knew very well that the person she was looking at was not Nie Yang, but itself. White carried Jiang Pingji back gracefully and calmly. The enemy was so frightened by the scene that they didn't dare to shoot a second wave of arrows. When Jiang Pingji was far away, the arrows that were frozen in the air rustled and fell to the ground like fallen leaves. Kill! She unsheathed her sword. Only then did everyone wake up from the scene. Old Man Sun Wen couldn't help but touch his chest. He almost forgot to breathe. Hearing Jiang Pingji's order, Bai Ning and the other generals immediately led their troops to kill the enemy. The battlefield was filled with battle cries. Zaidao, you don't look too good. Jiang Pingji, the main culprit, didn't have any self-awareness. She even had the cheek to ask Sun Wen in return. Sun Wen's fingers trembled as he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He hadn't completely come back to his senses. It's okay. I'll be fine after a while. I'll be fine after a while. The moment the enemy released the arrows, Sun Wen almost thought that Jiang Pengji would die in front of the formation. He couldn't think of any other reason for the miraculous scene just now, other than the heaven's decree. Sun Wen was so sure, not to mention the enemy's camp. Jiang Pengji calmly returned to her camp under the rain of arrows. The enemy soldiers who witnessed everything lost their will to fight. On the other hand, the soldiers at the rear couldn't see it clearly. Their morale was low, but it wasn't to the point where they had lost their will to fight. Qin Gong and the others led their troops to attack. They didn't encounter any decent resistance. The enemy's line of defense was as fragile as paper. After 2 hours of fierce fighting, the Nya army fled back to the camp with their defeated soldiers. Jiang Pengji's side also sounded the gong to retreat. They returned victorious. My lord, just now. Sun Wen's mind kept replaying the scene where the arrows stopped. The more he thought about it, the more scared he became. Jiang Pengji turned her head in confusion. What just now? Qin Gong, on the other hand, was straightforward. He went straight to the point. The enemy released hundreds of arrows, but my lord was unharmed. Is there really a god protecting you? After Jiang Pengji transmigrated, she rarely used her spiritual power in actual combat. The few times she used it was to investigate the enemy's situation. This time, she made an exception to confirm the rumor that she was the child of destiny. She wanted to completely destroy the Nya army's psychological defense. She admitted that she was very stingy. She still remembered the fire at Zhanjiang Pass. If she didn't pay them back, they would really think that she was made of mud. God, there's no such thing. This is just my own ability. Jiang Pengji's thoughts raced. She suddenly thought of something. A comprehensive explanation appeared in her mind. She said, when I was young, I had a dream. I dreamed that the scorching sun descended from the west. The land was barren, and starving people were everywhere. Just as I was feeling afraid, an old man in white with white hair and a beard walked out from the sunset. He gave me a set of bamboo slips. He told me that the bamboo slips recorded a set of body training techniques that were specially created for women. He also said that women are born weak because they lack 30% yang energy when they are created. They can make up for this deficiency by practicing this technique later in life. When practiced to perfection, they can even release their inner energy to protect themselves. Sun Wen was silent for a long time. He seemed to be thinking about the truth of his lord's words. Jiang Pengji extended her hand to him and smiled. Try it. Sun Wen raised his hand and put it down. Halfway through, he felt that he had hit a barrier and could not move an inch. He didn't believe it. He increased his strength, but it still did not move. Instead, he saw a layer of pale golden ripples. Jiang Pengji said, Do you believe me now? The underlying meaning was. Chapter 1499. Sun Wen retracted his hand and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. The golden crow's descent from the east is already against common sense. My lord also dreamed of 1,000 miles of desolation and starving people everywhere. Perhaps it was a sign that chaos was coming. In a desperate situation, a deity came out and gave her a book, which happened to cater to the slim chance of survival. Jiang Pengji listened to Sun Wen cover up her lie with a straight face. She was very satisfied. It was worth it for her to pretend to be pretentious today. However, Bai Ning reacted quickly. He said, I heard that the training technique practiced by the female troops was also passed down by my lord. Could it be? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, Indeed, I improved it according to the book given by the deity, because I found that only I can practice the original version. If ordinary women practice it, not only will there be no benefits, but there will also be the danger of exploding and dying. I made some slight changes, and the effect seems to be not bad. Bai Ning and the others were convinced. It was not only because the person who said this was Jiang Pengji, but also because the soldiers of the female battalion were solid evidence. The size of the female battalion was not considered large, but their physical fitness was indeed similar to that of the young and strong men. Some outstanding ones could even surpass them. In addition, their training technique also had a set of coherent combat techniques. If ordinary men did not practice martial arts, 2 or 3 of them might not be able to take down a female soldier. Bai Ning was surprised. It turned out that they were making up for the 30% of yang energy that they were born with. The salted fish listened to Jiang Pengji, deceiving them with a straight face, and secretly gave her a thumbs up. What was the highest realm of lying? Naturally, it was to squeeze countless lies together and turn them into the truth that others could not refute. To Defaccio. Looking at the streamer lying with a straight face, I really believe her. Bai Huayu. The streamer is not completely lying. At least that set of training technique is really useful. There was a trending topic a few days ago. It said that a martial arts club that was about to close down was selling dog meat. They claimed to teach martial arts, but in the end, they taught the streamer's training technique. The male students also improved, but they did not improve as rapidly as the female students. There was a female student who brutally beat up 4 or 5 groups of perverts on the street. At the mention of this trending topic, all the salted fishes recalled it. The incident started when the female student was on a public bus and encountered 4 or 5 perverts who had nothing better to do than to grope her buttocks and try to take off her underwear under her short skirt. In a fit of rage, she violently beat them up, and the people on the bus could not stop her. The perverts even knelt down and begged for their lives. If someone had not called the police in time, and the police officers had not saved their lives, they would have been sent to the ICU by the hot-tempered female student. In the end, they found out that the female student was underage and had been practicing martial arts for 5 years. She usually only sparred with the students of the dojo, so she didn't hold back. As soon as the report came out, the dojo became an internet sensation. There was an endless stream of parents signing up, and the news of the dojo master being sold could no longer be covered up. The dojo master was completely exposed by the netizens. Thinking about the trending topic and listening to Jiang Pengji's words, the female salted fish were eager to have a go, while the male salted fish were trembling. Shamate Li Si. Baby QAQ, I don't want to marry a weaker version of the streamer at all. Is there a way to survive domestic violence? Deng Hai Kwangma. Is it too late for me to apologize to my wife with a washboard? To tell you the truth, my wife has been a fan of the streamer ever since she started streaming. She's secretly learning the technique of physical training. I feel so flustered. No wonder she used to act coquettishly to me when I just poured out a bottle of mineral water. Yesterday, when the elevator broke down, she actually carried a gas tank and climbed 5 floors in one go. To Defaccio, you're done for. You can't afford to provoke her. Stop struggling. Don't provoke your wife in the future. Domestic violence will take your life. Lula Wadding. It's time to set up a women and men protection organization to protect the poor male comrades who are subjected to domestic violence. The salted fish chatted happily. But it was Jiang Pengji who remembered their jokes. She had lied earlier that women lacked 30% of yang energy when they were conceived and needed to practice to make up for it. It was just to lay a foundation for the future. To improve the status of women, it was far from enough to just have women in power. After all, there were too few women who could climb to a position of power, and they themselves had physiological burdens. In the current agricultural society, it was impossible to close the gap between women and men in terms of production, so improving the status of women was just empty talk. If technology was developed enough to change the mode of social production and free manpower from the fields, people would naturally have the energy to care about human rights. If they could not even provide food and clothing, how could they talk about equal human rights and equality between men and women? Or they could strengthen the competitiveness of labor and production. Jiang Pengji planned to focus on the latter, while developing technology to promote the former. To her, human resources did not distinguish between men and women. Wasting human resources was a shameful act. She lied and covered the technique of physical training with a layer of mythical color. It would be much easier to promote it to the people in the future. For women, practicing it was not only to make up for the physiological gap between them and men, but also to help with childbirth and reduce the probability of dystocia. The medical technology of this era was too backward. Women married early, and their first childbirth was generally concentrated at 16 or 17 years old. Their bodies were not fully developed, so the probability of dystocia and miscarriage was extremely high. Once a pregnant woman gave birth, she would have one foot in the gates of hell. If the technique of physical training could reduce the difficulty and pain of childbirth and reduce the risk of death, wouldn't it be a good thing? Jiang Pingji returned victorious. The way the soldiers looked at her was not like they were looking at a person, but more like they were worshipping a god. The heavy rain when Nieliang set fire to Zhanjiang Pass, and the arrows that stopped in midair today, all indicated that Jiang Pingji was the destined son of heaven. Don't be fooled by the fact that they always said, "Men do not speak of supernatural forces and gods." If a supernatural event really happened, they would believe it faster than anyone else. After her triumphant return, Qiguan Rang handed Jiang Pingji a secret letter. Where did it come from? Looking at the signature, Jiang Pingji asked again, "How's the battle over at Jingtu's side? Is it still in a stalemate?" Because of the inconvenience of communication, the letter in Jiang Pingji's hands was actually old news from more than a month ago. The mountain spirit descended and bestowed the divine art of shipbuilding. Qiguan Rang's eyes were smiling as he said, "It seems that my lord is really the person destined by the heavens. What else could it be, if he wasn't the chosen son of heaven?" Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "Spread this out. It's best if everyone knows about it and angers Nieliang to death." Today's miracle and the defeat of the Nia army were enough to make Nieliang suffer. Jiang Pingji was about to leave when she saw that Qiguan Rang was hesitant to speak. She asked, "Wenjing, is there anything else?" "There is indeed one thing," Qiguan Rang said. "Since my lord is the son of heaven, you naturally know about the gods." Jiang Pingji saw that Qiguan Rang lied with a straight face and secretly laughed. Others did not know if it was true or false, and were fooled by her. But she had told Qiguan Rang about his background. There was no reason for him to be so superstitious. She thought so in her heart, but said, "It's true." A trace of malice flashed in Qiguan Rang's eyes. Every word seemed to be coated with poison. "If that's the case, why don't my lord reveal some of the will of heaven and announce to the world that Nieliang's lifespan is approaching?" Jiang Pingji was speechless. "Wenjing, you're really showing off more and more." Chapter 1500. Qiguan Rang saw that Jiang Pingji did not speak. He thought that she felt that it was inappropriate and was about to persuade her. Jiang Pingji held back her laughter and said, "No, Wenjing, you misunderstood. In fact, I think what you said makes a lot of sense. This is what we should do. When dealing with enemies, one could never be too ruthless." Seeing the two of them putting their arms around each other's shoulders and smiling at each other, the same thought appeared in the minds of the surrounding salted fishes. Tuda Faccio. Colluding with each other. That's perfect. Buckle Jiao Jiao Chi fan. Let's go, let's go. When this pathetic duo is put together, their evil hearts are so scary. Obsessive-compulsive disorder patient. Every time I see Wenjing and the host doing bad things together, I wonder why the host didn't like Wenjing before. Although C.I. Marin was very good, she always felt that C.I. Marin was much gentler and kinder than Wenjing. It was not compatible with the host's aura. Stockholm. I think you seem to have some misunderstanding about Beauty C.I. She looks gentle and kind. Isn't her heart whiter than Master Wenjing's? You haven't seen it with your own eyes when Beauty C.I. becomes evil. Anyway, I have gracefully offered my knees to you for a year. Besides, when Big Boss Wenjing met the host, he was already engaged. They were purely friends, so it was impossible for them to call each other Black Cat's Night. It's fine as long as the CP fans keep themselves cute. The host and Big Boss Wenjing seem to have a lot of CP fans. Just entertain yourselves. Don't involve real people. After all, the relationship between the host and Big Boss Wenjing was pure friendship. It was disgusting to forcefully interpret it as love. Even though he was a salted fish, he didn't have a lot of pure KY love brains. He knew his limits. Of course, most of the hardcore fans who liked KY were young. How could their hand speed and internet speed compare to old salted fish, who had been single for a long time? How could they imagine the price of a house in a live broadcast room? Always wicked people want to harm Jin. Speaking of which, if it weren't for Simiai's sacrifice, the streamer would really be single for the rest of her life. The salted fish didn't believe in pure friendship between men and women until they met Jiang Pingji. As a very outstanding woman, there were many men around her. But only the lame Wei Ci took a fancy to her. The others were either single or married with children. Salted fish, who had nothing better to do, had even carefully researched this topic, making it a hot topic. In the end, an excellent answer was liked and pushed to the top. Egami sauce. First, no one will fall in love with a boss who squeezes them dry all day long. Secondly, this only proved that they were all straight men. Being in a relationship with a streamer is like coming out of the closet. You guys are touching Tan 90's breasts and talking. Does she look like a girl? The salted fishes chattered incessantly. Jiang Pingji laughed at herself. Wenjung, don't you think we're in cahoots? Qiguan Rang glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. His gaze was clear as day. Who would insult themselves like that? This is called like-minded, Qiguan Rang retorted with a straight face. Jiang Pingji was speechless. The little princess was right. If they were like-minded, then so be it. She had no objections. Jiang Pingji decided to reward the three armies after the great victory in the day. They celebrated for the whole night, and the bonfire burned throughout the night. In contrast, the atmosphere in Nying was not as relaxed. The entire army was enveloped in a suffocating and oppressive atmosphere. Bad news came one after another, and the morale of the army was completely shaken. 3 valiant generals had died in the battle. Hundreds of arrows stopped in midair. Lu Shi was unscathed. The morale of the army had collapsed. The number of casualties and captives reached 40,000. Niel Yang was also shocked to the point of vomiting blood. Perhaps he had gotten used to it, but he did not faint this time. However, his appearance made everyone worried. To put it in a depressing way, their lord, Niel Yang, looked like he was about to die. Get up. This isn't your fault. Blame the enemy for being difficult to deal with. Niel Yang did not blame his son, Nie Qing. Even if he was the one fighting, the situation would probably be the same. According to the scene described by the crowd, their enemy had the support of a deity. Hundreds of arrows could turn a person into a hedgehog. However, all the arrows strangely stopped in midair 5 feet in front of Jiang Pingji. Circles and circles of pale golden ripples were like a heavy shield, blocking all the harm outside. The arrows could not advance an inch. The 3 armies could only watch as she rode away calmly, a strategist sighed. Has anyone seen such a scene since ancient times? Throughout history, when had such a scene appeared? No, perhaps there had been. Niel Yang could not help but think of Beichen from hundreds of years ago. Beichen was the dynasty before the chaos of the 16 kingdoms. This dynasty had unified the Central Plains for 367 years. For many scholars, Beichen was the Orthodox dynasty. This could be seen from Chengjing. Huangsong's ancestor was a descendant of the royal concubine of the Xia dynasty. The royal family of the Xia dynasty was also a descendant of the royal family of Beichen. With this identity, Huangsong could be assisted by Chengjing. Although Huangsong did not know that he had such a powerful background, Chengjing knew. Speaking of Beichen, it was also a dynasty full of legends. The founder of Beichen was born in a small family of farmers. When he was born, a golden dragon was born. Coincidentally, the world was in chaos. His father and brothers died of exhaustion in the Battle of Chinka. Coincidentally, the founder of Beichen led his troops to revolt. At that time, there was a powerful feudal lord who was about to conquer the world. The world thought that this overconfident peasant boy would kneel. Who knew that a few days before the decisive battle, there would be a sudden rainstorm. The dam collapsed and countless lives were drowned on both sides. The enemy's feudal lord suffered because they had set up camp on low ground. Their rations and supplies were all wet and moldy. This was not the worst. On the eve of the decisive battle, there were tens of millions of meteors, long or short, big or small. They accurately hit the camp, causing countless deaths and injuries. It was a godlike operation. Because of this, the royal family of Bachin became known as the descendants of the gods. It lasted for 367 years. There were several coincidental miracles that extended the life of the royal family of Bachin every time. In the last years of Bachin, the royal family courted disaster again. They caused chaos in the world, and the people were plunged into misery and suffering. They could not bear it anymore. There was no need to bear it anymore. Various forces revolted, and the royal family of Bachin was destroyed. However, the feudal lords who destroyed the royal family of Bachin died miserably. Their entire families, young and old men and women, did not have a good ending. The common people said that the royal family of Bachin was indeed the descendants of the gods. The world should be theirs. Which of the feudal lords who stole their world had a good ending? In the end, the 16 countries were in chaos for so many years. In the end, did the descendants of the royal family of Bachin stand out? Now the mythical color of Jiangpingji seemed to have the shadow of Bachin. This made people's hearts beat fast. Could it be that the ancestors of the Lu family of Hejian have the blood of the descendants of Bachin? Someone thought of this history like Niel Yang and spoke to break the heavy atmosphere. Wei Yang's expression became stern. He scolded, "Nonsense. Are you trying to shake the morale of the army?" Chapter 1501. Wei Yong sneered. If the Bachin imperial family was so blessed by the heavens, how could they have died without a burial? When Bachin had been destroyed, the imperial tombs of a dozen emperors had been dug up and smashed by the angry people. The corpses in the coffins had been dragged out and whipped. All kinds of funerary objects had been robbed. Other than Huangsong's branch that had escaped, none of the other descendants of the Bachin imperial family had a good ending. Was this divine favor? The talk of gods and ghosts was just something those stupid people had made up to scare him. Wei Yong tried to convince himself. He also tried to use these words to convince others. Niel Yang was silent for a long time. He smiled disdainfully and said coldly, "No matter what kind of Yao art Lu she used to put on this show, she has achieved her goal." The Nia army had almost lost their will to fight. The soldiers only knew to turn and flee. People squeezed and stepped on each other. It was a mess without order. This resulted in only a few of the enemy's casualties. They had lost 40,000. 40,000 casualties, and almost no resistance at all. They were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The enemy only had to repeat the action of swinging their swords. Thinking of this, Niel Yang's already pale face became even more deathly still. "Report." At this time, the messenger's voice broke the silence in the tent. Wei Yong did not dare to let Niel Yang read the battle report directly in case it was bad news and anger Niel Yang. "Read it and then tell me." Niel Yang understood his gaze and gave a weak smile. Rather than saying he trusted Wei Yong, it was more to comfort him. Because of his broken body, Wei Ling was already frightened by the mere twang of a bow. Wei Yong took the secret report and read it closely. Everyone secretly looked at his expression and guessed if it was good news or bad news. Seeing Wei Yong's brow furrowed and his knuckles white from the force, they knew it was bad news. It was definitely bad news. Niel Yang sighed and reached out to indicate for Wei Yong to give him the secret report. Whether it was good news or bad news he had to know. "Master." Wei Yong resisted for the first time and overstepped his bounds. "This news," he stopped speaking. Niel Yang did not force him and said, "If you won't let me see it, then you will relay it. Is there worse news?" Wei Ling took a deep breath, her eyes slightly red. Lu Shi sent General Fu Wang to attack Yang Tao. Not long after, someone called himself Shan Gui and offered him the art of shipbuilding. They were already under great pressure, and the entire army was in a state of panic. They did not dare to go against the child of destiny that was appointed by the heavens. Now there was the appearance of the mountain ghost descending to the world to bestow the divine art of shipbuilding. For Niel Yang and the others, it was undoubtedly one disaster after another. However, this was not the end. Niel Yang tightened his grip on the mat, trying to suppress the rising pain in his chest. The veins on his forehead bulged. After a while, everyone noticed that his eyes were wide open, as if his eyeballs were about to pop out of their frames. It was extremely frightening. What else? That's not the only thing, right? What else is there? Just say it. Don't tell me that I'll be angered to death by her. Nieliang knew his best friend very well. If it was just such a piece of bad news, why would his eyes turn red? Lord. Wei Ling's lips moved for a while, as if hesitating whether to say it or not. In the end he still said it. He almost choked with sobs as he said, "The secret report said, God entered your dreams and told Lu Shi that Lord's lifespan is not enough to be calculated, and is not a concern. A person's lifespan was 12 years in an era, and 100 days in an era." Nieliang's eyes widened like a goldfish that was suffocating. His chest rose and fell rapidly, and he vomited a mouthful of red and black blood. Everyone was so frightened that they did not dare to make a sound. Wei Ling and Nie Qing hurriedly went forward to support him, but they did not expect the two to be waved away by Nieliang. Nieliang's strength was so great that he did not seem to be seriously ill. However, many people were worried that this was the final radiance of the setting sun. Waving the two away, Nieliang suddenly raised his head and laughed. He raised his hand to the top of the tent and scolded in a hoarse voice. "What damned heavens! If fate has decided, it will take away my lifespan now. Man can conquer nature. So what if it's Lu Shi? So what if it's her?" Nieliang stood up shakily. There was a faint hint of insanity between his brows, which made people's hair stand on end. Wei Ling looked at his good friend, and his heart ached uncontrollably. He still remembered the scene when he first met his good friend. He was incomparably elegant and elegant. He wore a black scholar's robe with a thin coat over it. He wore a lacquered gauze crown on his head. His slightly thin lips carried an amiable smile, but there was a faint sense of alienation. He was the standard son of an aristocratic family. Now, how did he become this haggard and demeanor of insanity? As he pondered, he heard Nie Qing's loud shout. It sounded like a cuckoo crying blood. His heart tightened when he heard it. Lifting his head, Wei Ling saw Nie Qing rush forward like an arrow and raise his hand to catch Nieliang, who had fallen backward with a deathly still face. Wei Ling opened his eyes without blinking. The noises around him gradually faded away. The voices of Lord seemed to be a vague voice from another world. Nie Qing cried out for his father, and a group of colleagues knelt on the ground and cried blood. What happened? How could it be? Wei Ling's knees gave way, and he collapsed to the ground. The night passed. The scouts that Jiang Pingji sent out discovered that the Nie camp was draped in white mourning. Everyone looked mournful, and hurriedly sent the news back. Jiang Pingji was having breakfast. Her breakfast that day was a total of 15 meat buns mixed with minced meat. Each bun was the size of a strong man's fist. An ordinary man would be almost full after eating 3 buns. Jiang Pingji ate 15 in a row and drank 3 bowls of seaweed soup with shrimp skin. Jiang Pingji burped inelegantly and patted her flat stomach. She picked up a handkerchief and wiped her mouth. "Tell me what's the latest news." Jiang Pingji hated military intelligence before and after eating. It was fine if there was good news, but bad news would ruin her appetite. The soldier said, "Last night at midnight, Nieliang died of illness." Everyone in the Nie camp was mourning. The whole army draped in white mourning and hung up white banners overnight. Jiang Pingji was stunned when she heard the news. "No. Is Nie Guangshan that weak? Brother, you're really fast. You're rushing to finish the filming." The livestream room was in an uproar. Jiang Pingji hurriedly pushed the food table aside and hurriedly gathered everyone for a discussion. Everyone looked at each other. Even though they had been looking forward to Nieliang receiving his bento all day and night, when he really did, it felt like a dream. This brother died just like that? Feng Yi and Sun Lan, who were sitting in the corner and listening, muttered to themselves. It was fine if he died, but he died of anger. This was great. Their lord's image of seeking revenge for the smallest grievance had been completely recorded in history. Thinking of the lord's words and actions that were recorded a while ago, Feng Yi felt that her lord would be slandered by the future generations. Wei Xi asked, "Did the Nie camp really hang up white banners, and the whole army draped in white mourning?" Jiang Pingji said, "Zixiao, are you suspecting that it's a trap?" Wei Xi was not sure. Nieliang was very treacherous, but his body could not withstand a series of blows. Thus, Wei Xi said, "It's not that I'm suspecting it. It's just that Nie Liang died of illness. We have to send people to offer our condolences." Jiang Pingji. Zixiao, are you serious? Chapter 1502. Although I don't want to admit it, Nie Liang's death seems to have something to do with me. If we send someone to offer our condolences now, I'm afraid that they won't appreciate it. They'll probably think that we're going there to show off our strength. Jiang Pingji felt that whoever she sent would be courting death. Envoys are not to be executed during a battle? T. This kind of conventional rule could be broken at any time. Which fool would stick to it? Not only did Jiang Pingji and the civil and military officials feel excited, but the salted fish were so shocked that they forgot to eat breakfast. A small group of cute and good-looking people cried until they were out of breath. Topics such as Nie Liang's death and Nie Liang was angered to death by the streamer were also trending. Hearing Jiang Pingji's opening words, many of the salted fish sneered. Long-lasting tea. What do you mean by a little bit of relationship? From the looks of it, the host had no idea what was going on. Tudafetio. You can't say that. If I remember correctly, Nie Liang is not in good health. Didn't Beauty Ci reveal that Nie Liang had been poisoned in the past? It seemed that it was done by someone from within the Nie family. Nie Liang refused to rest quietly, and the remaining poison greatly reduced his lifespan. Later, it was said that Nie Liang's lifespan was less than half a year. Now that he was dead, the host could only be regarded as a catalyst and not the main cause. The person who really killed Nie Liang was the original murderer who poisoned him. Jiang Pingji was at most an accomplice. Always wicked people want to harm Zhen Sai. He's a Duke of Zhongzhou after all. It's really sad that he's kneeling just like that. Unreal City. Come on, there are plenty of people who have died in the hands of the streamer. So what if they are feudal lords? Some salted fish lamented that Nie Liang's death was a pity. Some salted fish celebrated that Jiang Pingji was one step closer to unifying the world. And some salted fish expressed concern and condolences. No matter what the cause of Nie Liang's death was, outsiders would think that he died because he was angered by Jiang Pingji. Sending people to offer their condolences was equivalent to sending people to their graves. Jiang Pingji knew this too. How could she send someone to offer her condolences? She never expected that Wei Xi would disagree with her at this time. Out of respect for her opponent, she still had to send someone to offer her condolences. Jiang Pingji said, "I've killed at least 8,000 people, if not 10,000. Do I have to pay my respects to all of them?" In any case, she wouldn't agree. Regardless of their strength, in terms of status, Nie Liang and Jiang Pingji were of the same level. If she really wanted to send someone to offer her condolences, the status of the messenger could not be low. She was not willing to choose anyone. Wei Xi volunteered himself. Jiang Pingji was so angry that she glared at him several times. No matter what Wei Xi said, she refused to agree. Lord, condolences are one thing, but confirming that Nie Liang really died of illness is another. What if he really faked his death? Jiang Pingji said. Then let's wait for 3 to 5 months. Anyway, his body has long been ruined. Sooner or later, he will meet the king of hell. Wei Xi could only sigh. Jiang Pingji was stubborn, and so was he. No one was willing to take a step back when it came to issues that concerned the overall situation. In the end, Jiang Pingji was so angry that she flicked her sleeves and left. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Qiguan Rang said quietly, "You're really bold. The Lord obviously wants to protect you from taking risks, but you don't appreciate it." Wei Xi smiled bitterly and said, "How can I not know the Lord's intentions? It's just that Nie Liang died of illness. Whether it's true or not, if the Lord doesn't express her stance, I'm afraid you'll be criticized. This is not good for the Lord's reputation." The time when Nie Liang died of illness was when the morale of the Nie army was in chaos. No matter what, they didn't dare to kill the messenger when there was no leader. We can't sacrifice the lives of more than 200,000 troops just because of a moment of impulsiveness. His lord had a violent temper. If something really happened to the messenger, she would definitely send troops. Qiguan Rang glanced at him and sneered. "I see. You've thought it through. No wonder you're so fearless. It was precisely because he saw through the trick that he had the confidence to volunteer for the mission. Wei Xi continued. There's another point. Xi's elder brother Wei Dan is Nie Yang's confidant. Qi Guanrang said coldly. If I were your elder brother, I would definitely make sure that you wouldn't be able to return. Otherwise, you'll become a scourge by releasing a tiger back into the mountains. Wei Xi smiled and said, My elder brother's temperament is different from Wenjing's. He's good at everything. His only weakness is that he values friendship too much. If it wasn't for this, Wei Dan wouldn't have tried his best to protect the legitimate son of Nie Liang in his previous life. The situation in his previous life was very different from now. Nie Liang of the Nie family had died of illness a few years ago. His only son, Nie Qing, became a thorn in the eyes of the elders. The legitimate son of the third branch of the Nie family, Nie Yang, took advantage of the chaos to rise and secretly gain the trust of Old Master Nie. Old Master Nie was also a weirdo. He was old but young at heart. His greed for power and desire to control his descendants made people's hair stand on end. He was old and lacked the energy to deal with affairs. In order to ensure absolute authority, Old Master Nie promoted Nie Yang, who coincidentally came into his line of sight. Because Nie Yang was young, innocent, not loved by his parents, and his mother's family was weak, who would have thought that these were all Nie Yang's disguises? Nie Yang used Old Master Nie to snatch the position of the Nie family master. He secretly harmed his disloyal fellow clansmen and sent Old Master Nie to heaven. Nie clan became Nie Yang's word, and Nie Qing's situation improved. After all, everyone was afraid of Nie Qing's father Nie Liang. Nie Liang died of illness. Nie Qing's talent was not as good as his father's. There was nothing to fear. Raising him was just another pair of chopsticks. In order to fulfill his best friend's wish and protect Nie Qing, his brother Wei Qiong married his eldest daughter to him. Wei Qiong himself died of depression. When his brother died of illness, he was not even 50 years old. It was because he valued his feelings too much that Wei Qiong could not kill him when Wei Xi went to pay his condolences. Qi Guanrang did not comment, but he would not doubt Wei Xi's judgment of people. If Wei Xi really went to pay his condolences to Nie Liang, it would most likely be daunting but not dangerous. The only obstacle was his lord did not agree. What's the point of saying so much? If the lord doesn't agree, can you go there in private? Wei Xi laughed. The lord will agree. Wenjing, do you dare to bet with me? Qi Guanrang scolded jokingly. When did you learn Feng Zisher and Yang Jingrong's bad temperament? What's there to bet? I won't bet. Because he knew in his heart that if they really bet, Wei Xi would definitely win. The facts proved that Qi Guanrang's guess was right. The next day, Jiang Pingji agreed to Wei Xi's request with an extremely sullen expression. After all, it was not a matter of principle. Jiang Pingji really could not dissuade Wei Xi. Of course, if it was a matter of principle, Wei Xi could not dissuade her either. I suddenly remembered that when my lord's grandmother died of illness, it was Zixiao who went on behalf of my lord. Jiang Pingji squatted on top of the wall and looked at the figures of Wei Xi and his group gradually becoming small dots in the distance. Her face was full of melancholy. She said, Otherwise, why would I call you my wife? You're so virtuous. What more can I ask for? Qi Guanrang's expression froze. He looked disgusted. Jiang Pingji said with a face full of vicissitudes. Wenjing, do you think Nie Guangshan is really dead? Qi Guanrang said. Zixiao will go to pay his condolences. Whether Nie Liang is dead or alive, there will be some clues. Jiang Pingji said. What if he's really dead? Doesn't my lord think that this is a good time to seize the opportunity to annex the Nie family of Zhongzhou? Once Nie Liang is dead, Nie Qing won't be able to shoulder the heavy responsibility. The Nie family is full of hidden dangers. It's a good time to seize the victory and pursue the enemy. Qi Guanrang sneered. What do you think, my lord? Jiang Pingji rubbed her chin. I always feel that it's immoral to scheme for someone's family property the day after their corpse has yet to turn cold. Qi Guanrang was speechless. Chapter 1503. Zixiao is too rash. How can the Nie camp still be rational? What if he really doesn't come back? Old Master Sun Wen was very worried about this. The current situation was very bad. Wei Xi running over would be courting death. He understood the logic of Wei Xi's analysis. But how could people worry so much when they were agitated? Not to mention other things, if one or two disobedient and hot-tempered generals wanted to use force, could Wei Xi escape unscathed? If he doesn't come back, more than 200,000 people will be buried with him. Zixiao is not at a disadvantage. Qiguan Rang took a sip of tea and said leisurely, since ancient times, how many emperors have been buried alive with people, but not even this number. Besides, Zixiao is a loach, it's not easy to catch him. Sun Wen choked. He did not expect Qiguan Rang, who had always been single and unsociable, to crack a cold joke. Nieliang's death is more or less related to the Lord. I'm afraid that going to mourn will be seen as a provocation. Although old Master Sun Wen hated the Nie family, he felt it was a pity when he thought of Nieliang's death. Qiguan Rang smiled coldly. It's human nature. Was Wei Xi really going to mourn sincerely? Don't be ridiculous. He mainly wanted to confirm if the person was really dead. He also had the intention of flaunting his strength and suppressing the Nie family. Normal people would not believe that a weasel marrying a chicken for 100 years was an act of kindness from the bottom of his heart. While the two were chatting, Wei Xi and his party arrived 2 miles away from the Nie camp and were stopped halfway. Who are you? The scouts of the Nie army looked at Wei Xi and the others with hostility, and faintly surrounded them. Wei Xi smiled and bowed while riding on the horse. We are here on the orders of our lord to mourn Duke Guangshan. When the Nie army scouts heard this, their faces turned livid, and they wanted to draw their swords to kill. Wei Xi smiled faintly, as if he did not see the shining blades. Instead, it was the soldiers who escorted him, who came forward to protect him. When two armies fight, envoys are not to be killed. Today, we are here on the orders of our lord to mourn Duke Guangshan, not to fight in front of the battlefield. Is it your idea or someone else's? Duke Guangshan has just passed away, and you are ignoring military discipline? Wei Xi was so calm that he managed to subdue a few soldiers of the Nie army. They looked at each other, and finally took a step back, and sent someone to pass the message. When Nie Ying and the other hot-tempered generals heard this, they exploded in anger. What does Lu Shi mean? You've angered the previous master over and over again, and now you've sent some cheap slave soldiers to pretend to be nice? This general's scolding was not polite at all. The scholars frowned when they heard this. The price of a head was only 1 copper coin. Whether it was a slave or a soldier, both of them were the lowest class in society. Even if they were angry in their hearts, Jiang Pingji had the guts to send someone over. The status of the messenger was definitely not low. It was too hurtful to scold someone as a slave soldier with a high price. Another person gritted his teeth and said, just a moment ago, they were playing tricks on us, angering our late lord to the point of dying of illness. Now they're sending people to offer their condolences and hold a funeral. Clearly, they're taking advantage of our Nie family for granted. Get him to scram. If he dares to take even half a step into the former lord's mourning hall, I'll make him come in on his knees and roll out like a human swine. Some of the generals were even more hot-tempered. They carried weapons that weighed 30 to 40 kilograms and wanted to go out. Everyone, please wait a moment. I'll go chop off his head and offer it to the former master's spirit. Hearing that they were getting angrier as they spoke, Wei Yong, who was dressed in a plain morning dress, berated them with an indifferent expression. Enough. Isn't it messy enough? Everyone had indignant expressions on their faces. They were all men of iron and steel. How could they endure the fact that the enemy was taking advantage of them? Wei Yong said, take care of the former master's funeral and stabilize the army's morale to prevent Lu Shi from taking the opportunity to make trouble. Only after these are done can the former master pass away with peace of mind. If you touch the messenger, Lu Shi won't care if the former master passes the 7th day of his death. Do you want to see a new scar on the former master's body before it's even cold? His words were so harsh that the few troublemakers did not dare to make trouble again. However, there were some who were unconvinced. If Lu Shi dares to send his troops, this general will dare to meet them head-on. The former master died unjustly. Do you still want to be humiliated by them after his death? The general straightened his neck and asked angrily, is the military advisor afraid of death? You know that the traitors have ill intentions, yet you still want to protect them? This isn't about being afraid of death. It's about looking at the bigger picture. Wei Yong had not slept well for 2 to 3 days. His face was abnormally pale, but he still forced himself to say, you can act like a hero for a while. If the former master's funeral can't be held, then you can lead the troops to fight Lu Shi. The general said mournfully, are you going to let them flaunt their strength in front of the former master's coffin? Wei Yong said, not necessarily. If they come, they should offer incense and mourn. They should act like filial sons and grandsons. When the general heard this, he felt a little better. Wei Yong asked the messenger, who is the messenger Lu Shi sent? The messenger replied, this person's surname is Wei and his name is Ci. He claims to be Lu Shi's advisor. In an instant, everyone realized that Wei Yong's face was twisted. It was an indescribable expression. Wei Ci, isn't this Zi Shun's younger brother? As Niel Yang's right-hand man and close friend, Wei Yong's family connections had been completely uncovered. Many people who were on good or bad terms with him knew that Wei Yong had a third brother who was squatting on Lu Shi's side as an advisor. They had never imagined that the person who came to mourn this time would be Wei Ci. This time someone laughed mockingly. It looks like Lu Shi also knows what he's doing. Another person echoed, that's true. If he didn't know what he was doing, why would he send Wei Ci over? Isn't it because he wants elder brother's protection? Wei Yong said coldly. If Wei Ci is the slightest bit disrespectful in front of the former master's coffin, he will definitely kill him himself. When these words were said, those who had other thoughts did not dare to say anything else. Before the former master Niel Yang died, he had entrusted young master Nie Qing to Wei Yong. Wei Yong was the young master's father-in-law and had a strong backing. Fan Shen said to Wei Yong in private, I've made things difficult for you. Your younger brother is also insensible. Wei Yong said, Zixiao has been a sensible child since he was young and has never caused anyone to worry about him. If he dares to come, he most likely has the confidence to escape unscathed. Fan Shen choked for a moment. Who gave him the confidence to pull out his swords? Wei Yong said in a muffled voice, his elder brother. Because he understood his elder brother's character and knew that Wei Yong would consider the bigger picture. Wei Yong was certain that Wei Yong would not dare to let anything happen to him in front of Niel Yang's coffin. Fan Shen cast a sympathetic look at Wei Yong. With such a troublesome younger brother, Wei Yong was pitiful enough. Even though the smell of gunpowder was thick in the tent, when Wei Ci came over, the atmosphere was considered good. At least the expected scene of someone drawing a sword and rushing up to slash at him did not happen. When everyone saw the sword hanging from Wei Ci's waist, their faces immediately fell. This fellow was asking for a beating. As if they could read minds, Wei Ci stopped in front of the tent and unsheathed his sword before entering. Wei Ci first bowed to Nie Qing, then nodded his head in greeting to everyone. He took out the sacrificial items and placed them in front of the coffin. He knelt in front of the coffin and offered sacrifices. His every move was flawless. Ci came in a hurry and had not prepared the funeral oration. I could only write it in a hurry. I hope young Lang Jun will forgive me. Chapter 1504. Wei Ci said that his funeral oration was written in a hurry, so they did not have any expectations for the content of the funeral oration. Funeral oration used for funerals were mostly articles expressing mourning, remembrance, and mourning for the deceased. The current funeral oration was mainly prose and 4-character rhymes, and it was easy to recite. The content was basically to remember the deceased's life experiences, praise the deceased's character, and express grief. If there were any mistakes in the funeral oration, there was a high chance that Wei Ci would be stabbed to death in front of Niel Yang's coffin. The scholar standing in the corner looked at Wei Ci's respectful and devout attitude and sneered in his heart. He said in a low voice, he had never met the late master. How could he write a heartfelt funeral oration? It's hilarious. As mentioned earlier, The content of the funeral oration was related to the deceased's life experiences. If Wei Xi did not know Nie Liang, his writing would not be appropriate. Unbeknownst to him, Wei Xi had done some research on Nie Liang. After all, his brother Wei Dan from his previous life had written more than 10 funeral oration after Nie Liang's death, almost one every year. The year Wei Dan died of illness, he was bedridden with a cold and could not get up to attend the funeral. It was Wei Xi who went on his behalf. Wei Xi did not know Nie Liang well enough, but Wei Dan definitely did. He sorted out many letters for Wei Dan's funeral and found that most of the letters were written to his close friend Nie Liang. Some were funeral oration, some were ordinary letters, and some were long-winded chatter. Last night, I dreamed of the past, and suddenly realized that it has been 14 years since Guang Shan passed away, and I am 47. Life is already half over, and the pear tree in front of the courtyard has bloomed and withered several times. Day and night, my mind is in a mess. Thinking of the first time I met you, you wore a black robe and a black crown, standing under the courtyard, talking elegantly. Thinking of all the past now, it is as bright as before, as if it was yesterday. Your laughter and words still ring in my ears. Alas, Guangshan, the heavens do not give me false years. I die of old age, my heart aches, libation. I mourn your early death, I also weep blood. Of course, these were all written by Wei Dan to Nie Liang as a friend. Wei Xi could not directly copy, or he would reveal flaws. With detailed materials, it was not difficult to write a standard elegiac oration. Other than the crackling of the white candles burning in the tent, there was only the sound of Wei Xi's sincere recitation of the funeral rites. As the funeral rites began, everyone's irascible and irrepressible emotions seemed to have found an outlet to vent. Nie Qing even knelt in front of his father's coffin and cried until his face was covered in tears. After Wei Xi finished reciting, he gave a long bow. Regardless of whether it was the funeral oration or the etiquette, no one could find fault with it. Even if everyone wanted to make things difficult for him, they had no excuse. Someone secretly wiped his tears and sneered. Was it really written in a hurry, and not someone ghost-wrote it? What interaction did Wei Xi have with Nie Liang? The contents of the funeral oration were all true. This level of understanding was definitely not superficial. They must have been close friends. Someone berated in a low voice. Stop talking. Don't be presumptuous in front of the deceased Lord's spirit. I know you're not happy with Wei Zixuan, but you can't simply accuse him. After Wei Xi entered the tent, his every move was under our eyes. Did the two brothers communicate at all? Not only did they not communicate, but Wei Xi did not even look at Wei Xi once, let alone act as his gunman. Kneeling in front of the spirit, Nie Qing wiped his tears. It took him a while to calm his sorrowful mood. He asked Wei Xi in a hoarse voice, "Does your lord have any instructions?" Before Nie Liang passed away due to illness, out of consideration of morality and benevolence, Jiang Pingji could not mobilize troops before the 7th day of his death. Otherwise, she would be nailed to history and be reviled. No matter how great the hatred was, according to the tradition of the deceased, no matter how big the matter was, it had to be moved to the end of the funeral. Wei Xi said, "My lord instructed me to come here to pay my respects. My every move must be respectful, and not the slightest bit negligent or rude." Nie Qing sneered and ignored Wei Xi's Tai Chi excuse. "What else?" Wei Xi said, "Stop fighting for now. Young Langjun helped the spirit back." Nie Qing did not speak, but Wei Xi said, "Regarding the matter of helping the spirit, the young lord has his own plans. There's no need for an outsider to help him plan. The Duke of Lanting is willing to send Zixiao to pay his respects. Whether it's sincere or not, he's up to no good. He's taking advantage of the fact that there's no one in the Nie family. After 7 days, let the Duke of Lanting wait. The enmity of the late lord's death can't be let go just like that. Please pass on these words, Zixiao." Wei Xi sighed and stood up. He knew that such a situation would happen. In his previous life, Nie Liang died early, and his elder brother died of depression. Naturally, the two brothers had no conflicts and had always been respectful. This life was different. Nie Liang walked to the front of the stage, and Wei Xi assisted from the side. Nie Liang's death had something to do with his lord, so the relationship between the two brothers became tense. However, Wei Xi did not regret it. They were still brothers, but they had different standpoints. I will pass on every word to the Lord. Wei Xi glanced at Wei Xi out of the corner of his eye. His eyes were surging with complicated emotions that outsiders could not understand. Wei Xi said in a low voice, "Brother, why do you have to do this?" Nie Liang had just died. The internal strife in the Nie family was fierce. More than 200,000 troops squatted at Zhangjiang Pass and fought to the death. If the power in the rear changed and their rations were cut off, Wei Xi and the others would be in a desperate situation. Don't think that the Nie family and the others couldn't do it. What couldn't those people do? Wei Xi asked him. Judge others by yourself. If the person lying in the coffin today was the Duke of Lanting, you would know why. Wei Xi was speechless and could only choose to remain silent. Brother, take care. Before Wei Xi left, he glanced at Nie Liang lying in the coffin. After bidding farewell to Nie Qing, he turned and left. Seeing Wei Xi leave, everyone held their breath and almost couldn't breathe. Nie Qing said, "Father-in-law, what should we do now?" Wei Xi was a step behind and followed beside Nie Qing. He said calmly, "The late lord made thorough arrangements when he was alive. Young lord, don't worry. The obstacles in Nie Qing's path would be swept clean." The days of keeping vigil were tough. The white banners and mourning cloaks fluttered in the wind. The originally unstable morale of the soldiers had been stabilized by Nie Liang's death. Wei Xi continued to use his methods. Not only did the soldiers not lose their will to fight, but they were determined to fight to the death because of their grief. Because Nie Qing had lost his father, he had eaten very little for several days. He looked pale and weak, and he had suffered a lot. Nie Yang could only persuade him to eat a little. If he didn't eat, Nie Yang would accompany him silently. Sigh. Looking at Nie Qing's back, which was unsteady on his knees, Nie Yang sighed in his heart. This Nie Liang is really ruthless. He even hid it from his son. In reality, there were only two people who knew that Nie Liang was still alive. One was Wei Xi, and the other was Fan Shen. Both of them were old foxes. During the vigil, the two of them cried bitterly, as if their father had died. The system laughed coldly. They wait for people like you who are ambitious and can't hold back. Nie Yang secretly glanced at Wei Xi's tent. Does he really not have many days left? Chapter 1505. After returning to the tent, Wei Ling restrained the sadness on his face, and his gaze was once again filled with warmth. Nie Liang, who should have been lying in the coffin, was sleeping lightly on his bed. Nie Liang faintly opened his eyes when he heard the sound of footsteps approaching, and he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart after confirming the identity of the person that had arrived. What's the situation outside? Wei Yong said in a low voice. Everything is going smoothly. We've sent people back in secret, and those obstacles will be eliminated one by one. Thinking back to the dangers of that day, Wei Yong broke out in a cold sweat. Nie Liang fainted. After the doctor took his pulse, he confirmed that his breathing and pulse had stopped. Wei Qiong cried for a long time. He and Fan Shen wiped the body of the late master and changed his clothes. Unexpectedly, Nie Liang coughed softly and slowly woke up. Even though Nie Liang had crawled back from the gates of hell, his body was already unable to bear the burden. He finally made up his mind to pave the way for Nie Qing. Those who obstructed Nie Qing and the Nie clan had to die. The corpses in the coffins were easy to deal with. Nie Liang had Death Warrior shadow guards by his side. Their appearance and figure were similar to his, and with a little disguise, they could pass off as genuine and deceive people. Unless it was a relative or someone who had been in contact with the corpse for a long time, it would be difficult to tell that the corpse in the coffin was fake. Once Nie Liang really died, he would be able to exchange it with the corpse in the coffin. Even if Wei Xi was reborn, the number of times he had really interacted with Nie Liang could be counted on one hand, and he did not discover any clues at all. In order to keep it a secret, the only people who knew were Wei Yong and Fan Shen, even Nie Qing. It was not that Nie Liang was heartless to hide it from his son. It was only because he knew that Jiang Pingji would send someone to pay her respects and to test if he was really dead. If Nie Qing knew the truth, the possibility of him being exposed was too high. Since that was the case, it was better to keep it a secret and wait for the dust to settle before Wei Yong told him the truth. Nie Liang sneered. I'm afraid they're going to celebrate and hold a banquet to celebrate that I've finally been taken away by the king of hell. Wei Yong suppressed his heartache, his expression cold. Those people won't live for long. Nie Liang smiled and said, That's true. If the people I sent were faster, they might even be ahead of me. Wei Yong looked at his friend's haggard and weak appearance and felt extremely depressed. Just by looking at Nie Liang's current appearance, who would be able to imagine that he was once the noble son of a gentry clan that was renowned in the capital and possessed peerless elegance? Nie Liang saw the forbearance under his expression and suddenly revealed a faint smile. It's not that I don't remember the promises I made with Zishan. It's just that the heavens don't give us false years. You and I are mere mortals, how can we go against the heavens? Nie Liang consoled him. The ancients often said that man can conquer the heavens. How can we know that we are not obeying the heavens? Perhaps Nie Liang was born with a short lifespan. In the future, if Liang Zhen unfortunately passes away, Zishan shouldn't be too sad. If after death his spirit sees Zishan being implicated by a good person, his heart will not be at ease. Wei Yong said, If it weren't for this vile person causing mischief and poisoning you, how could you be like this? Getting to the bottom of it, the symptom lies in the Nie family. As long as I carry the identity, I will never be free. Nie Liang said, If there's a next life, I'd like to be a commoner and live in seclusion. I'd like to make 2 or 3 friends and go to banquets when I'm free. I'd like to not be bound by the secular world. Even without this vile person poisoning him, there would be another vile person causing mischief and assassinating him in the future. Ever since old Master Nie seized power and stirred up endless internal strife in the Nie family, Nie Liang had seen through this point. Unless the problem was solved from the root, what was bound to happen would still happen. Wei Yong's eyes were bloodshot and filled with tears. Nie Liang knew his good friend's temperament well. These words couldn't resolve him. If a few words could, then Wei Yong wouldn't be Wei Yong. If there's a next life, Yong will still be Guangshan's close friend. You and I will look at the moon in the wind, burn incense and boil wine, and talk about the world. That will be enough. Nie Liang laughed. You're really stubborn. Isn't it enough to be burdened by a good person for a lifetime? You want to compensate for a second life. If Nie Liang hadn't taken the initiative to befriend him, Wei Yong would most likely still be that refined scholar sitting peacefully by the window reading poetry and books. He wouldn't have been involved in the Nie family's internal strife and the world's struggle. Nie Liang felt very guilty when he mentioned this. He had let everyone down except Wei Yong down. If Wei Yong held a grudge because of his death for the rest of his life, he wouldn't be at ease even if he closed his eyes. Wei Yong didn't think it was bad. If the regrets in this life could be fulfilled in the next life, it would be a blessing. After saying so much, Nie Liang was mentally exhausted. He couldn't resist the exhaustion of his body and fell into a deep sleep. On the other side, Wei Ci returned after paying his respects. He maintained a contemplative expression along the way until Zhangjiang Pass came into view. Jiang Pingji was relieved when she saw Wei Ci return in good condition. She began to ask about serious matters. Is Nie Guangshan really dead? Wei Ci said, The corpse in the coffin is indeed him. Everyone's performance is flawless. Jiang Pingji sighed. This dear friend received his bento so quickly. He finished filming in just a few scenes. It's really beyond my expectations. I don't even know if I should continue bullying his son. I keep feeling like I'm bullying him. By the way, they didn't make things difficult for you, did they? Wei Ci had already learned to automatically filter out words that he didn't understand, such as finished filming, and received his bento. They didn't make things difficult for me. But their morale didn't collapse with Nie Liang's death. Instead, they seemed to be united against a common enemy. Wei Ci was also a smart person. If outsiders wanted to make things difficult for him, they really needed to be capable. If Nie Liang is dead, then so be it. He's still causing trouble for me. Jiang Pingji crossed her arms in front of her chest and said, "Did they have anything for you to say?" The morale that had collapsed due to grief and indignation condensed. Nie Liang was forcibly prolonging his life. Wei Xi completely repeated Wei Lian's words. Jiang Pingji sneered and said, "What do they mean? Are they waiting for Nie Liang to come out of his grave and challenge him for revenge?" Wei Xi sighed and said, "That's most likely what they mean. Then I'll fulfill their wish. I hope that Nie Liang's coffin will be buried by then. Otherwise, it won't look good if it's dug out." As a face tank, Jiang Pingji's ability to attract hatred was indeed incomparable to that of ordinary people. If Wei Lian and the others knew about this, they would draw their swords and fight her to the death. What did she mean? She was just short of saying that she wanted to dig out Nie Liang's corpse and whip it, or expose it to the wilderness. The corner of Wei Xi's mouth twitched. He always felt that it was not without reason that his lord was hated so much. When one was her enemy, not only would one's body be tortured, but one's spirit would also be attacked many times. Nie Liang's psychological quality was already high enough, but his lord was too good at infuriating people. Her series of actions could anger people to death. Because of Nie Liang's funeral, the two armies were busy with their own matters and did not make a big move. At the same time, the Nie family of Zhengzhou received the news of Nie Liang's death at the first instance. For a moment, people's hearts wavered and waves surged in the dark. Great, Nie Guangshan's death is really wonderful. He's gone. How can Nie Qing protect the Nie family business by himself? In the end, won't we have to step in? Otherwise, the Nie family will be swallowed alive by the feudal lords. Chapter 1506. Nie Liang was perhaps a complete tragedy. When he passed away, other than his wife and mother who would sincerely grieve for him, the other relatives would look solemn and sorrowful. But when they returned to the house, they couldn't help but laugh and celebrate. Among these people, even his father was among them. The relationship between father and son was so thin. Although Nie Liang was the son of the first wife, he wasn't his father's favorite son, nor was he his father's favorite successor. When he stood up to seize the Nie clan, Nie Liang's father had been sullen, vaguely viewing this son as an enemy. In his view, Nie Liang wasn't suitable to inherit the family business, and this son wasn't the successor he had personally raised. So what right did he have to take over the Nie clan? Compared to his eldest son, Nie Liang, who was quite opinionated, he preferred his youngest son, who was obedient, sensible, and filial. Ever since he was young, he had personally taken care of this youngest son, whether it was his studies or his life. He was also the son who was most like him in his heart. Fathers always preferred children that resembled themselves. Although he didn't like Nie Liang, he still felt some pity for his eldest son's death. If Nie Liang was alive, he could still support his younger brother in the future. Don't cry. Do you want other families to laugh at us? Father Nie couldn't speak his mind, and he had to pretend to be grieving for his son. He finally had a break, but when he returned home, he still had to listen to his wife sobbing. He was very upset. The wife stopped crying and faintly said, "My son is gone, and I'm not allowed to grieve for him? Your father is really ruthless." Having his thoughts seen through, Father Nie felt as though his secret had been exposed. He couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. Women don't know anything. What else can you do besides cry? Nie Liang's father didn't want to listen to his wife's crying, so he simply got up and went to sleep in his beloved concubine's room. He didn't know how many people died in their dreams that night. The Nie clan was filled with the smell of blood and a haze that couldn't be dispersed. It was late at night, but many people didn't feel sleepy. The news of Nie Liang's death gave them a chance to reshuffle. Those uncles and elders who were suppressed by Nie Liang were also eager to try. They all summoned their aides and guests over, preparing to spend the night discussing how to maximize the benefits. However, before they had time to discuss anything, black shadows broke in, as if there was no one around. Someone with sharp ears heard the commotion and shouted sternly, "Who's there sneaking around?" The sound of footsteps could be heard as men dressed in black rushed in one after another. They were all holding sharp sabers in their hands. How could the crowd not know what was going on? They all shouted, "Assassin!" Unfortunately, the speed of the reinforcements could not keep up with the speed of the assassins. One by one, they lined up to report to Yin Luodian. Some of them had learned martial arts and were able to draw their swords to defend themselves, but they could not withstand the massacre of this group of desperados. Why is it so noisy outside? There were also some who had already taken off their clothes and rested. Not long after, they were awakened by the commotion. As soon as they opened their eyes, they vaguely saw a black shadow standing in front of their beds. They were instantly scared out of their wits. Without waiting for him to call out, the assassin raised his hand and chopped off his neck. Blood splattered all over the ground. The same situation played out in different places. None of the ambitious members of the Nye clan's direct line or collateral line were spared. The next day the news spread like wildfire. Those who were lucky enough to survive almost wet their pants in fright. Their bodies were drenched in cold sweat, and they were glad that they had survived. Panic, fear, relief, anger. Their complicated feelings were mixed together into a ball, causing their hearts to feel stuffy, and their hands and feet to feel icy cold. Who do you think did this? As soon as he said this, the rest of them looked at each other. They did not dare to voice out their guesses for fear that they would be killed. After a while, one of the Nye clan members said, "Most likely, perhaps an enemy?" His answer was disdainful. This large-scale assassination was too sudden. The enemy had obviously planned this for a long time, and had planted informants around the target. That was the reason why this assassination was so swift and clean, and it didn't give anyone the chance to rescue or escape at all. How could a sudden idea have such an effect? Apart from that, the identity of the people who died last night was also worth investigating. The person who set up this assassination must be very familiar with the internal power structure of the Nye clan, the identity of the members, and the location of their residences. After thinking about it, there seemed to be only one possibility. At this moment, someone suddenly said, "Don't forget what happened to these people before they died." What happened? Everyone sweated profusely when they heard this. The news of Nye Liang's death had just arrived, and a large number of Nye clan members who had threatened Nye Liang and his son died that night. Not only within the Nye clan, some of the leaders of the forces that were attached to the Nye clan were also warned. It was easy to imagine who was the one who did this. No, didn't Nye Guangshan die? Could it be that the news was fake, and they were deliberately deceiving us? It's not that they were deceiving us. Did you forget that Nye Guangshan had several loyal lackeys around him? Nye Guangshan's plans were meticulous and ruthless. In order for his son to stand firm, he might have instructed his lackeys to clean up a group of eyesores before he died. Among those who died last night, which one of them was content with their lot? Someone said timidly in a low voice. He's not afraid that someone will rebel? So many members of the Nye clan died at once. Wasn't Nye Liang afraid that they would rebel? Of course Nye Liang was not afraid. Using this wave of cleansing, he had also cleaned up the hidden dangers within the Nye clan, and once again regained the authority he had lost. As long as Nye Qing was not muddle-headed and had Wei Yong, Fan Shun, and a few other trusted aides by his side, Nye Qing would definitely be able to protect the Nye clan. Of course, Nye Liang did not intend to bear the responsibility of killing the elders of the same clan. Nye Liang had long thought about who would be the scapegoat. "Zixuan, is Nye Liang still obedient?" Wei Yong said in a low voice. "He's been calm these days and there are no flaws. If it wasn't for the Lord's vigilance, I'm afraid we wouldn't have expected Nye Liang to hide so deeply. With such a scheming mind, I'm afraid he's plotting something big. I don't know what other tricks he has up his sleeve." To be safe, Nye Liang asked Wei Yong to bring his son Nye Qing to the front line. Nye Qing then brought Nye Liang over. Nye Liang was not very wary of his nephew Nye Liang. He had investigated Nye Liang long ago. There was nothing to suspect about this child. He was timid and harmless. There was no harm in keeping him by his son's side. After that, Nye Yang's nightmare called the police, allowing Nye Qing to avoid Jiang Pingji's assassination. This instead aroused Nye Liang's suspicions. Nye Liang did not believe in ghosts and gods. He would always be suspicious of such mythical coincidences. Nye Qing trusted Nye Liang too much. This made Nye Liang secretly suspicious. After thinking about it, He sent someone to thoroughly investigate Nie Yang. Because Nie Yang had been brought to the front line by Nie Qing, there were only servants guarding the house at the back. After a carpet search, the people sent out quickly found a suspicious secret compartment in Nie Yang's study. Chapter 1507. After inspection, this powder was exactly the same as the poison Nie Liang had been poisoned with in his early years. Not only was Nie Liang unable to accept this result, even Wei Yong felt it was too absurd. How old was Nie Yang when Nie Liang was poisoned? He was at most 10 years old, a child. What ability did he have to do it so flawlessly? If Nie Liang had not been careful enough to investigate Nie Yang, he would not have been able to discover that hidden compartment, much less find the culprit behind the poisoning. Even if Nie Yang was not the real culprit, he could not escape being involved in the poisoning. Nie Liang laughed self-deprecatingly, the corners of his lips curling into a mocking smile. Hunting wild geese all day, only to be pecked blind by the geese. To think that I prided myself on being smart, yet I was schemed against by a junior, truly laughable. Ever since Nie Liang found out that he had been poisoned, he had re-screened the people around him, and secretly sent people to investigate the poisoning. However, no matter how he investigated, he could not find the culprit. Following the clues he had, he would only find a few uncles in the end. However, Nie Liang knew that although these uncles had the motive to poison him, they did not have the time to act. Therefore, the person who harmed him was still hiding behind the scenes. Nie Liang had never let down his guard, who knew that a new clue would appear, and he would be caught off guard. Nie Yang was younger than Nie Qing, so why would Nie Liang suspect him? After discovering that there was something wrong with Nie Yang, Nie Liang did not get rid of him immediately. Firstly, he was worried about his son Nie Qing. Secondly, he felt that Nie Yang was really strange, and it was not good to alert the enemy before figuring it out. Thirdly, being schemed against, he had to collect some interest. Nie Liang planned to push the blame of killing an elder of the same clan onto Nie Yang to clear his suspicions. This way, his son Nie Qing could see this person's true face. Wei Yong said, "I really don't know how he could have so many schemes at such a young age. He's even more shrewd than an old fox." The moment those greedy and ambitious old foxes of the Nie clan heard that Nie Liang was dead, they could not hold back their ambitions. They never thought that Nie Yang would be able to suppress his nature. To be able to do this, either Nie Yang was innocent, and they suspected that he had been mistaken, or Nie Yang's mind was so deep that ordinary people could not deal with him. Or, could Nie Yang have already guessed that Lord Nie Liang was not dead? Wei Yong voiced out his conjecture. Nie Liang said, "What's the point of investigating this now? My body can't hold on for more than a few days. I really have the heart, but not the strength. Nie Yang is indeed very scheming, it's a pity. Otherwise he could be Qing Er's right-hand man." Nie Liang was quite satisfied with his son, except for one thing. Nie Qing was too pure and kind. This kind of personality was nothing in a flourishing age. Nie Liang could protect him, to become a noble son of a landowning family. But now it was troubled times. Even with Wei Dan and the others assisting him, Nie Liang was still worried. If it wasn't for the fact that he was too pure and easy to bully, Nie Yang wouldn't have had the chance to get close to him. Now their relationship was so good that it was as if Jiao could never leave Meng, and Meng could never leave Jiao. Since he was sure that Nie Yang was a hidden danger, Nie Liang planned to secretly send people to get rid of him. He wouldn't be able to see these things, but Wei Yong would help him achieve them, and the ending would be similar. Wei Yong said, "This kind of person cannot be left for long. It's best to eradicate him as soon as possible." Whether it was Nie Liang or Wei Yong, they were both cautious people, not to mention that Nie Liang was already dead. Logically, other than them, no one else knew about this conversation, but they didn't know that Nie Yang's ability was close to that of a spiritual monster, and couldn't be measured with common sense. Nie Yang knew that Nie Liang wasn't dead, so he didn't dare to let his guard down, and often let the system keep an eye on him. Of course, this conversation was heard by Nie Yang as well. The system sneered. "Now you know the difference between you and Nie Liang, right? If I didn't help you, you wouldn't even know how you died." Nie Yang's face was hidden in the shadows, but his eyes shot out a cold light, and his murderous intent spilled everywhere. The system said relentlessly, "If I didn't help you, you wouldn't have been able to poison Nie Liang. Even if you succeeded, you would have been easily caught by him. If I didn't help you, you wouldn't have been able to restrain your ambitions when Nie Liang faked his death, and he could have gotten rid of you. If I didn't help you, now you wouldn't even know that Nie Liang already had murderous intent towards you, and was prepared to use you before sending someone to kill you. You still don't dare to admit it? You're just a mortal. No matter how scheming you are, you can't compare to my ability." Nie Yang's previous attempt to turn the tables had made the system extremely annoyed, and now it was going all out to attack him. The system also knew that Nie Yang was scheming, but no matter how scheming he was, if he didn't have the ability to realize it, it would just be a joke. Taking advantage of this, the system wanted Nie Yang to completely understand his own weight, so that he would obediently surrender and not challenge the system's authority. "This is a death trap. You'll die if you're not careful, and Nie Qing won't be able to protect you. If he finds out that you're the real murderer of his father, do you think your brotherly relationship with Nie Qing will matter? Now the only person you can rely on is me." The system laughed maliciously, like a demon whispering in Nie Yang's ear, tempting him to fall deeper into the abyss. After a while, Nie Yang laughed foolishly. His expression was still cold, but his eyes were filled with madness and murderous intent. "Rely on you?" Nie Yang couldn't help but laugh, and he said, "Nie Liang wants to kill me. Are you some kind of saint?" Until now, he could not forget the lightning torture the system gave him, where he could neither live nor die. With the system's attitude, how could Nie Yang believe that it was kind to him? From Nie Yang's perspective, the system was also an evil spirit, hiding in the dark and plotting something. When the system achieved its goal, he, Nie Yang, might end up worse than death. The system laughed sinisterly. "I can at least let you live for a few days. You don't want to die without tasting power, do you?" It had been bound to Nie Yang for so many years. It knew very well about Nie Yang's obsession with power, almost to the point of being possessed. Nie Yang was silent for a long time after listening to the system. As he struggled in his heart, his young face became twisted and sinister. The system laughed. "Have you thought it through?" Nie Yang asked it. "Do you have a way to turn the tables?" Nie Liang and Wei Si started to suspect Nie Yang. Nie Yang didn't think that he could turn the tables. This was a dead end. The system said, "Yes, of course. The person who's going to die is Nie Yang. Anyway, what if you're not Nie Yang?" Nie Yang frowned. He didn't know what sinister trick the system had come up with. "You mean, you want me to disguise myself as someone else and find a substitute to die for me? That's not easy." Wei Si and the others weren't familiar with him. They could find someone who looked 70 or 80% similar to him to fool them, but Nie Qing would definitely be able to recognize him. Unless the system had the ability to find someone who looked exactly like him, with the exact same height and body shape. As expected of a mortal's thinking, the system is omnipotent. Back then, I could secretly poison you, so naturally, I have the ability to help you out of danger. Speaking of which, if it wasn't for you acting smart and keeping a tail on me, Nie Liang wouldn't have suspected you even if he died. The system sneered. "I have something in my hands that can perfectly turn you into someone else, and at the same time, make someone else perfectly turn into you. With your rotten heart, you should be able to understand what I mean, right?" Chapter 1508. "You. What do you mean by that?" Nie Yang's voice was trembling, like sandpaper rubbing against glass. There was a hint of resistance in his voice. The system could not be bothered with Nie Yang's nonsense. How could the system not know how black-hearted this kid was? If he couldn't bear to pretend now, what was he doing earlier? The system laughed mockingly. "Host, don't you think it's too late for you to pretend to be a saint? Forget, you don't know what a saint is. A saint is a good person. Nie Qing is closer to the side. You won't even have that word in your next life. In terms of the darkness of the human heart, even the system can't compare to you. What did I mean just now? Do you dare touch your non-existent conscience and say you don't understand?" The system's words were full of sarcasm, causing Nie Yang's face to turn green and white. Selfishly, Nie Yang did not have much feelings for Nie Qing, but he was not that cruel either. He planned to let Nie Qing live. However, the system was far more cruel than he was, and wanted to swap their identities. This way, Nie Qing would take the blame for Nie Yang and die in the hands of his father, Nie Yang, and father-in-law Wei Yong. This way of dying, Nie Yang was so angry that he wanted to crawl back from hell, much less Nie Qing. Nie Yang sat paralyzed and hesitated for a long time before asking tiredly, "Other than this, is there no other way?" The system said, "I only have this one method. Use it if you want. I won't wait for it to expire." Looking at the flickering candlelight, Nie Yang suddenly laughed foolishly, as if he had been relieved of some burden, and fell into an even deeper abyss. "I understand. What do you want me to do?" He should have known that the system had ill intentions, and would drag him into a hopeless situation sooner or later. It was too late to regret now. Nie Yang was already forced into a corner by Nie Yang. If he did not use the system's suggestion, he would not be able to break out of this hopeless situation. If he was merciful to Nie Qing, he would be cruel to himself. Years of planning and effort would be for naught. After thinking about it, Nie Yang still chose himself. Those who wanted to achieve great things did not bother with trifles. When necessary, he could even abandon his own parents and brothers, much less a cousin. Nie Yang secretly killed several of his uncles and drugged old Master Nie, causing him to become paralyzed and demented. Wasn't that also cruel and ruthless? Just as he was thinking, a slight movement came from outside. Nie Yang's mind sounded the alarm, and a hint of fierceness appeared in his eyes. Nie Yang's originally clear voice became hoarse from crying, but the smile in his eyes did not diminish. Familiar footsteps came over. Nie Qing's originally clear voice had become hoarse from crying, but the smile in her words did not diminish. Nie Yang quickly adjusted his expression, and returned to his gentle and harmless self, standing up. "Brother, why are you here?" Nie Qing said. "I heard from the soldiers that you haven't eaten much for 2 days. This brother had the kitchen make some appetizers for you. You must be tired from keeping vigil for your father these days. Even if you have a bad appetite, you should at least eat something to fill your stomach." "Ayang." "He yang 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 yang. Niev yang 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 yang." "He was along." He never of." "He yang yang." "No, nothing. It's just that I really have no appetite right now." "Yang yang eat." "Of yang nye. Nye 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 of yang of I. Yang is not to nye. I. I of. Yang with," Nye Yang said. "Yang of it of. Yang you not. Of. Nye Yang could not argue with him, and ate the food like it tasted like wax. Seeing that Nie Qing was defenseless, Yang felt complicated. Nie Qing read military books and learned new things. Nie Yang asked the system, "What's your idea? Could it be a possession in the novels?" The system smiled lazily. "No, I can do what you said, but it's too much effort. For a soul, a body born from a mother's womb is the most suitable. You and Nie Qing exchange souls. The biggest possibility is that both of you will become sickly and die early, because of the instability of your soul. My idea is to disguise yourself. This disguise can change your appearance to that of the other." The system was in a good mood, so it spoke more. "You and Nie Qing are inseparable. You know his hobbies, relationships, habits, conversation style. It's not difficult to disguise yourself, and the possibility of being seen through is low. Wei Yong may be Nie Qing's father-in-law, but they don't have much contact, so their understanding is limited. As long as you don't make any fatal mistakes, Wei Yong may be suspicious, but at most he will think it's because of the death of his father. Don't you think this idea is perfect? With Nie Qing's identity, you'll be the rightful young master. Everything will be at your fingertips." Actually thinking about it, Nie Yang's previous schemes were just messing around. If Nie Yang had taken advantage of Nie Qing's young age and unstable personality to take his identity, why would he need to plot against Nie Yang? The system's methods could easily smooth a rough road, but mortals could not. A bitter smile appeared on Nie Yang's face. It was indeed at his fingertips. At the same time, his fear of the system increased. To Nie Yang, the system and Nie Liang were both swords hanging over his head. The difference was that Nie Liang's sword was about to fall, and his death was near. But the system did not know. They were all enemies. Nie Yang was not someone who was willing to be enslaved. Even if the system used force to make him submit, his rebellious nature was still there. After 2 hours, Nie Qing prepared to leave, but Nie Yang urged him to stay. It's getting late. Why don't you rest here, brother? Nie Qing smiled. That's good too. We haven't talked at night in a long time. Their brotherly love was deep. Wei Dan was the one with the most pain in the ass. He knew that there was something wrong with Nie Yang, but he could not tell his son-in-law. Fortunately, Nie Yang was surrounded by spies. If he dared to make the slightest movement, what awaited him would be his head. Time passed quickly. Nie Liang's death passed in the blink of an eye. As the eldest son of the first wife, Nie Qing should return to his hometown and let Nie Liang return to his roots. Wei Dan said, the front lines can still be delayed for a while. Young master can rest assured. After the funeral of the late master is settled, we will take revenge for the late master. Nie Qing was hesitant. Father passed away, and we don't know what the situation is like in the clan. I'm afraid there will be a storm of blood when we return, Wei Dan said. Before the late master passed away, he already made proper arrangements. Young master does not need to worry. Nie Qing did not think that his father would even worry about this. An indescribable sorrow welled up in his heart, and his eyes reddened. Right, this subject wants to borrow someone from young master. Who? Wei Dan said. Nie Yang. Why does father-in-law want to borrow a Yang? He is usually very lazy and leisurely. If father-in-law wants him to do something, don't have too much hope. Nie Qing smiled. Fortunately, he is still young and has good talent. With more experience, he can become a talent who can take charge of things. Father-in-law should teach him more. Wei Dan felt his stomach ache when he heard this. At the same time, he became more wary. Nie Yang's thoughts were as deep as the sea. Although Nie Qing was kind and romantic, he did not lack any brains. He could hide it from Nie Qing and maintain such a good relationship. It could be seen that he could act. Chapter 1509. As a bugged listening device, the system had a firm grasp of Nie Liang, Wei Yong and the others' movements and conversations. Knowing the two's plan, the system gloated at Nie Yang. They're about to make a move. Wei Yong plans to let Nie Qing help his spirit back, and found an excuse to make you stay. If you want to make a move and switch identities, you have to do it within these 2 days. Otherwise, you won't have a chance. After spending some time to get used to it, Nie Yang was no longer as resistant and uncomfortable as before. I know. To be safe, I plan to make a move on the last night. If he changed his identity earlier, Nie Qing would definitely cause a ruckus and ruin his plan. It would be better to switch identities on the last night. When Nie Qing woke up, what awaited him would be his father-in-law's butcher knife. Thinking of that situation, Nie Yang laughed until tears came out of his eyes. The system was secretly speechless at Nie Yang's ruthlessness. On the last night of helping the spirit home, Nie Yang found an excuse to stay in Nie Qing's tent. The two brothers talked about many things that night. Not long after, Nie Qing fell asleep. Nie Yang, who was pretending to sleep, opened his eyes. He took out 2 pills the size of longans from his sleeves. These were the appearance change pills that the system had given him. After asking about the method to use it, the system gave him a bottle of sleeping powder that could make people fall into a deep sleep with just a sniff. For the appearance change pills to work, the target's blood had to be taken and mixed with it to be consumed. Nie Qing wasn't in a deep sleep. If the blood was taken directly, it might wake him up. Nie Yang's hands trembled as he cut Nie Qing's finger and stabbed himself. He mixed Nie Qing's blood with pills and swallowed it. Not long after, his slender body became more plump, his skin squirming like it was alive, making people's hair stand on end. When the squirming subsided, Nie Yang stood up and looked in the mirror. The person in the mirror was Nie Qing's face. As expected. Just where did the system come from? How could it have such a treacherous method? Not only the face, figure, skin, even the eyes and aura were the same as Nie Qing's. The system reminded, As the saying goes, one's appearance comes from one's heart. You have to control your heart. Otherwise, you'll be easily discovered. The only reason why Nie Yang looked so similar right now was because of the miraculous effects of the transfiguration pill. Once Nie Yang got used to it, his temperament would also change, and he would eventually reveal his flaws. However, this was nothing. Nie Yang took Nie Qing's place to carry the spirit back. For the time being, they were separated from Wei Yong. That old fox would not discover them. Nie Yang's eyelids drooped. I understand. I'll be careful. He fed the other pill to Nie Qing. Nie Qing fell into a deep sleep, and Nie Yang watched as Nie Qing's face turned into his. After ensuring that there were no mistakes, Nie Yang went back to sleep. However, he tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. He stayed up until dawn. That night, not only did Nie Yang not sleep well, Wei Yong was also in no mood to sleep. Master! Wei Yong suppressed his sobs and held Nie Yang's hands that were almost as thin as bones tightly in an attempt to keep him awake. Nie Yang was already on the verge of death, but somehow, a surge of vitality surged through his almost dried-up body, giving him the strength to finish his sentence. Zishan, take good care of Qing'a. If there's anything wrong, just scold and teach. Nie Yang felt that his vitality was quickly draining away. He subconsciously held Wei Yong's hands tightly and said, "The Nie family, if we can't save them, let them be." Nie Yang had sacrificed his life for the Nie family, but he could not let his friend fall because of him. Wei Yong naturally nodded his head and agreed to whatever Nie Yang said. Liang has a close friend like you. This life is not a loss. The last few words were said with his mouth. Wei Yong said, "This subject feels the same." After he answered, he found that Nie Yang had already closed his eyes, and his raised hands had loosened their grip. His heart thumping, Wei Yong knelt beside the bed and stared blankly for a long time before he reacted. He leaned to the side and suppressed his sobs. Not long after, Fan Qin came late. Seeing Wei Yong's situation, how could he not guess? Black shadows appeared in front of him, and he almost fainted. Zishan, Master's funeral matters. Fan Qin took a step forward and almost stumbled to the ground. Only then did he find that his legs were so weak that he had no strength. Act according to the plan. Wei Yong suppressed his grief with difficulty and said hoarsely, "Master has not gone far. Do not let him worry." The trap had been set, and they were just waiting for the prey to take the bait. At the first glimmer of dawn, Nie Yang stood up and neatly dressed Nie Qing's morning clothes. He gave a flawless smile in the mirror. However, today was the day to support the spirit back, so there was no need to smile. Therefore, Nie Yang changed his expression to one of grief and silence and strode away. Walking out of the tent, Nie Yang glanced back and finally steeled his heart to turn and leave. Father-in-law. Nie Yang respectfully called out to Wei Yong. The two were father and son-in-law, but they were also ruler and subject. Nie Qing still referred to him as father-in-law. It could be seen how important Wei Yong was in his heart. Thus, even if Nie Yang was very wary of this person, he could not act against Wei Yong in the short term. Wei Yong's face was extremely pale, and he looked somewhat dazed. He gathered his spirits and said to his son-in-law, "The journey is long. Young master has worked hard on the matter of supporting the spirit." Nie Yang asked a few questions out of concern, completely acting like a different Nie Qing. The system watched his performance and was secretly speechless. Nie Yang was really born in the wrong era, or else he would have swept the Oscars. Wei Yong said weakly, "It's nothing. Last night, I thought about my late master's past and couldn't control my emotions, so I couldn't sleep." The system reminded Nie Yang in a timely manner. This morning, Nie Yang couldn't take it anymore and passed away. Wei Yong was heartbroken and cried the whole night. "Don't expose him, he looks so pitiful." The person lying in the coffin now is not Nie Liang's substitute, but Nie Liang himself. Nie Liang's shrouds were all changed by him. If that's the case, father and son will die on the same day. I wonder how Nie Liang, who left first, will feel when he sees his son catching up to him on the road to hell. Nie Yang sighed. Looking at the current situation, don't you think you're too cold-hearted, system? The system wanted to roll its eyes. It wasn't a human, It was the highest form of life that surpassed humans. Humans were just ants. No matter how tragic their deaths were, it would not be able to arouse its sympathy. Nieyong was really stupid to use a human's mind to judge it. Wei Yong said, "The auspicious time is here, young master, go on your way." Nieyong warned, Yang's personality. "If there's anything wrong with him, please forgive him, father-in-law." Wei Yong could not even smile in response, and only said that he would take care of Nieyong. Raise the spirit. The white banner fluttered, and the mournful cries shook the heavens. Nieyong supported the spirit, and went on his way. Only when the tens of thousands of people left his sight, did Wei Yong's expression turn as cold as ice. His hands clenched into fists that made people's teeth ache. Go back. Chapter 15:10. The sleeping powder could make Nie Qing sleep until the sun was up, but he woke up before the procession set off. To be precise, the person who woke up wasn't Nie Qing, but a salted fish. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? That was what lucky Queen Xinyue was thinking. As an ancient big shot who had been in the live broadcast room for a long time, she had always been envious of those who had transmigrated, especially the super lucky queen, who was lucky enough to get a wedding costume from the host. Today was another round of Dream of 1,000 Years. She looked at the ID in the streaming room and waited anxiously. She had won the bid. She had transmigrated after winning the bid, but then she realized something was wrong. Her chest was flat, and there was an unfamiliar sausage under the blanket. Can't you be more professional in Dream of 1,000 Years? Isn't it good for a girl to wear a girl's body? She had touched it out of curiosity, but the body was sensitive. The little brother had stood up immediately, which scared her. If it wasn't for the streaming, she would have liked to try the experience of a man masturbating. As she muttered to herself, a warm, confused, and frightened voice rang in her mind. You, what kind of demon are you? Oh my. The salted fish lucky emperor was so scared that she jumped up. She could accept transmigration, but she couldn't accept such a supernatural event. It was too scary. Streamer, are you there? Why is someone talking in my body? There had been so many Dream of 1,000 Years in the past, but no one had experienced such a thing. Was there a bug in her transmigration? Jiang Pengji was having breakfast. As usual, she had 15 to 16 steamed buns, and 3 to 4 bowls of seaweed soup. Streamer V. You look like a military tent. Figure out where you are first. Don't panic, I'll always be here. The lucky emperor was slightly relieved. At that moment, the voice rang out again. It was panicky and confused. Who are you? Why is it Yang's voice? The salted fish asked timidly. Who is Yang? Jiang Pengji glanced at the streaming room. The temporarily borrowed body of the lucky emperor looked familiar. She frowned and quickly remembered who the person was. It was the host of the system fragment, a young man named Nieyong. But now, she realized that the system fragment wasn't with Nieyong anymore. Could it be that he had left in an accident? Jiang Pengji secretly denied this speculation. Apart from the main body of the system, the energy stored in the separated subsystems was limited, and it was impossible for the system to easily give up on a host. The conversation between Lucky King and the mysterious male voice continued. The man said, Yang is Nieyong. Who are you? Lucky King asked. Then who are you? As he spoke, he found the copper mirror. The face reflected in the copper mirror was Nie Yang's. The man could see everything around him through Europe's eyes, but he couldn't control his body. When he saw the face reflected in the bronze mirror, he almost lost his composure. How did he get into Nie Yang's body? Who was the one who possessed Nie Yang's body? Where are the Real Yang in my body now? All kinds of problems troubled Nie Qing. Yes, this unlucky person who had his nest occupied was Nie Qing. Dream of 1,000 Years had chosen his body as its host. It took Lucky a few minutes to understand the situation. If that's the case, I've joined Niang. He's my lord's enemy. Lucky Emperor was smart. He did not say host, but replaced it with lord, to prevent Nie Qing from asking all sorts of questions. Nie Qing's heart trembled. What did you say? What enemy? Who is your lord? The famous Lu Shi, my little brother. Are you afraid now? I have a strong backer, so you better behave yourself. Nie Qing suddenly lost control. He suspected that Jiang Pingji had used witchcraft to cause the current situation. Lucky King ignored him and curiously studied the system interface. According to Lucky King's guide on the forum, the system would give him a reminder to help him hide his identity. Lucky King didn't understand the situation, so he naturally sought help from the system. He was shocked when he saw it. Please leave this place immediately. A fatal disaster is about to befall you. Oh my, this is so exciting. She had only transmigrated for a few minutes, but a red alert had sounded. I'm not transmigrating, this is PUBG. In Nie Qing's ears, it was harmonized into, I'm not beeping, it's beeping, 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 beeping. Because he couldn't control his body, Nie Qing could only watch as the wandering ghost controlled his body to put on his clothes and leave the tent. Nie Qing couldn't help but ask, where are you going? Lucky King said impatiently, escape, don't bother me. The system was considerate enough to give him an escape route. The lucky emperor tried to calm his racing heart as he moved quickly. She didn't know if it was a psychological effect, but she felt a sense of danger following her like a shadow. According to the system, she came to a logistics tent, endured the stench, and picked out a military uniform to change into. Anyway, this body was a man's, so she changed into it and smeared her face with yellow mud. Relying on the guide given by the system, Lucky King blended into the patrol team without any mishaps. Nie Qing asked in surprise, how do you even know the password to change every 3 days? There were many people in the camp, and in order to prevent spies from sneaking in, the password was often changed everywhere. Nie Qing thought there was a spy in the camp, and was anxious about how to pass the news to Wei Dan and the others. He was caught off guard and heard a shocking discussion. The soldiers who stopped to rest actually said that Nie Qing was ready to set off. How is that possible? If he was here, then who was the Nie Qing the soldiers were talking about? Not long after, there was a commotion in the camp, as if someone was being tracked. Nie Qing once again heard an explosive news that turned his worldview upside down. Nie Yang secretly planned and sent people to assassinate the elders of the Nie family and its affiliated forces, with the intention of attacking young Master Nie Qing and seizing the Nie family. How is this possible? Wei Dan sent off the funeral procession and turned to kill Nie Yang. But he didn't expect Nie Yang to not be in the tent. Where is he? Where did the guards go? Wei Dan was furious. How many spies had he sent to keep an eye on Nie Yang? Why were they all transferred away? After a while, Wei Dan found out that the person who was transferred away was his good son-in-law, Nie Qing. More accurately, it should be Nie Yang who replaced Nie Qing. The system asked Nie Yang why he did this. Nie Yang said, you don't understand the human heart. If Wei Dan directly went to settle the score, he would most likely choose to torture him. That way, Nie Qing would have time to defend himself. But if Wei Dan returned and found that Nie Qing was not in the tent, he would most likely suspect that Nie Qing fled in fear of punishment. In his anger, he would most likely kill him, and Nie Qing would not have a chance to defend himself. The system was silent for a while. As expected, the human heart was hard to predict when it became vicious. Chapter 15:11. Hey, are you okay? Lucky Emperor realized that the voice in her head had gone silent. She could not help but ask with concern. Nie Qing did not answer. Lucky Emperor continued, humans will meet a few scumbags in their lives. Fortunately, there's still room for redemption. The most important thing for you now is to find a way to restore your identity. Now that you're wearing Nie Yang's face, you'll be killed the moment you show up. The Nie family's military camp was heavily guarded. Even with the help of the system notification, as long as she did not find a way to leave the camp, she would die. She said, I can only stay here for 12 hours. What do you plan to do after 12 hours? According to the various information and the system notification, Lucky Emperor found out that she was temporarily borrowing Nie Qing's body. However, because of the appearance alteration pill buff, this body looked like Nie Yang, and was about to face the danger of being hunted down. Let me ask you a few questions. Do you trust your father-in-law, Wei Dan, or your good brother, Nie Yang? After a while, Nie Qing's trembling and suppressed voice sounded in her head. Of course it's my father-in-law. Lucky Emperor said. Then it's settled. Your father-in-law said that Nie Yang secretly plotted against the Nie family and killed the Nie family's elders. It's very likely that he was the one who poisoned your father. You inexplicably ate the appearance alteration pill and became Nie Yang. Have you ever thought that the real Nie Yang also ate the appearance alteration pill and became you? If that's not the case, how do you explain the people who are supporting you? If he's really your good brother, why didn't he call for you when he suddenly changed his face and identity? If I didn't appear, your father-in-law would have cut you into pieces. Nie Qing was silent for a long time. However, Lucky Emperor could feel his emotions. Under the influence of that strong emotion, even she could not help but feel hatred and pain. I say, think of a way. Even with the system's help, she could not leave the Nie camp. Why? That old fellow Wei Dan had locked down the camp and said that not even a fly could be let out. Her idea of joining the streamer had gone down the drain. Now she could only hope that the native, Nie Qing, had a good idea. Nie Qing said, "Do me a favor. Do you know how to write?" Lucky King said, "Brother, are you looking down on the cultural level of a straight-A student who received 9 years of compulsory education, a key high school student, and a 211 university student?" Nie Qing didn't understand what she was saying, but she felt kindness. Help me write some words. I can't control my body. After all, they were 2 little grasshoppers tied to the same rope. She didn't want to be the first person in the history of Dream of 1,000 years to die prematurely. That would be too embarrassing. Not only did he not bring back any local specialties, he was also chopped into pieces by the father-in-law of this body. He could not afford to lose face. Nie Qing calmed down and said, Yang, although Nie Yang understands me, it's impossible for him to know everything. I still have a way to prove my identity, but I need your help. Help me hide for a while so that father-in-law can calm down. He knew very well how loyal his father-in-law was to his father. If they found out that the culprit behind all of this had escaped, they would have to kill him. Nie Qing would not even have a chance to defend himself. Although he didn't know where Nie Yang got the appearance-changing pill, it must have been an external skill. Nie Qing wasn't afraid of anything else. He was afraid that if he died, the appearance-changing pill would lose its effect, and he would return to his original appearance. If his father-in-law found out the truth, he would commit suicide as an apology. No matter what, he had to find a way to get back his identity. Lucky King said righteously, "Tell me, I'll write." After a while both of them fell silent. "Have you really studied before?" Nie Qing asked uncertainly. Lucky King almost exploded. "Are you questioning this straight-A student's educational background?" Although it was simplified Chinese, Nie Qing could barely make out the meaning. Nie Qing didn't ask for more. Nie Qing asked Lucky King to write an article that his father-in-law, Wei Dan, had written a long time ago. This article was about Wei Dan's first encounter with Nie Liang. Because it was somewhat personal, only 2 or 3 people had seen it so far, and Nie Qing was one of them. Because it was a camp-wide search, they couldn't let go of any suspicious places. Thus, Lucky King's words were discovered. What's so special about this scribble that's missing an arm and a leg? As one of the insiders, Fan Chen naturally joined in to share the pressure. This was to prevent Wei Dan from being provoked and leaving with the late master. Wei Dan spent a long time trying to identify these ugly scribbles that were missing an arm and a leg as words. Fan Chen could only recognize 1 or 2 words. What's written here? Wei Dan's face darkened and he frowned. It should be the first line of a poem. Is there anything else? Fan Chen said, there are a few more. Do you want to go take a look? Your body, Wei Dan said, is a little puzzled. They went to a few more places. The more Wei Dan read, the darker his expression became. The poem you're talking about is. Wei Dan recited a complete paragraph and said with a complicated expression, "This is a miscellaneous poem that I wrote in my spare time. Why would it appear here?" Fan Chen was also dumbfounded. You wrote it? Wei Dan nodded. I wrote it a few years ago. The content was a little rough, so it was buried in the study to collect dust. Fanchun clicked his tongue in wonder and asked, Zishun, think about who has seen it. Who do you think left behind these words? Since it was written by Wei Dan himself, and it was a work that had collected dust in his early years, there were definitely not many people who had seen it. Wei Dan said, there are only 3 people, the late lord, the madam, and the young lord. One had already passed away, one was far away in his hometown, and the last was at the funeral. It can't be these 3. Think again, could we have missed someone? Wei Dan shook his head. There shouldn't be anyone else who has seen it. What is the purpose of the person who left behind these words? As they spoke, a soldier reported that they had found another place. This time, the words were not poems written by Wei Dan, but by Nie Qing when he was young. However, Wei Dan reprimanded Nie Qing for being too crafty and moaning without reason, and had him rewrite it. In other words, this was a useless manuscript. The only people who knew about it were Wei Dan and Nie Qing. In another place, the European emperor wanted to cry, but had no tears to find that the enemy's search circle had shrunk even further. Even with the help of the system, it was difficult to get away. Big brother, are you sure those words are useful? Nie Qing said sadly. I'll give it a try. If I'm forced into a dead end, I can't die in the hands of my father-in-law. The European emperor sighed. Poor child, learn from my master in your next life. Be more careful. I can only help you this much. After a while, the European emperor heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Not long after, several spears were pointed at her head. I think it's a game. It's over. The European emperor slowly stood up from the stable where he was hiding, his hands raised high on both sides of his head. In the distance, 2 middle-aged men dressed in scholarly robes stood. They were Wei Dan and Fanchun. Fanchun said, You're quite good at escaping. Did you think about the consequences when you were doing evil? The European emperor could not help but struggle. He grabbed the manger with both hands and shouted at Wei Dan. Father-in-law, I'm your son-in-law, I guarantee it. I also know that there's a painting on the 3rd row of your bookshelf. Wei Dan scolded. Shut up, Fanchun. Chapter 15:12. Nie Qing asked curiously, How do you know what's under the 3rd row of my bookshelf? The European emperor said, I'm just spouting nonsense, but I feel like I hit the mark. Nie Qing was speechless. Wei Yong took a few steps forward and placed his right hand on the hilt of his sword. He pulled out his sword. Both the European emperor and Nie Qing thought to themselves, My life is over. Father-in-law, please wait. The European emperor raised his hand to stop him from approaching. His expression was full of anxiety. She carefully swallowed her saliva and said, Father-in-law, please don't do it. I'll cut my own throat. Please don't tire you out. Nie Qing had said that even if she had to die, she couldn't die in the hands of Wei Yong. The European emperor felt that it made sense. Fanchun looked at Wei Yong suspiciously and asked, When did Nie Yong become Zishuan's son-in-law? Wei Yong also said, I'm also curious. How did he get to call you father-in-law? Wei Yong originally suspected that the person who left these strange words had something to do with Nie Qing. But after seeing the person in person, he felt like he was possessed. Fanchun asked again, What's under the 3rd row of your bookshelf? Wei Yong glanced at him coldly. Fanchun felt an inexplicable chill. You believe his nonsense? Fanchun was speechless. It wasn't that he wanted to believe it, but Wei Yong's reaction forced him to believe it. He was so curious that his heart was itching. Wei Yong's gaze turned to the European emperor. His cold and murderous eyes made the European emperor and Nie Qing tremble. Bring her back for interrogation. Fanchun asked him. Why don't we just kill her to prevent future trouble? Wei Yong replied without turning his head. We can't kill her for now. The European emperor was tied up. Because the rope was very tight, she kept screaming in pain. Fanchun lost his patience. They escorted her to the tent. The European emperor was violently pushed and fell to the ground. She was in so much pain that tears welled up in her eyes. She felt very wronged. Who are you? Wei Yong dismissed his attendants. Only he, the European emperor, and Fanchun were left. I've already called you father-in-law. Who do you think I am? Your son-in-law. She was about to complain when Jiang Pingji sent her a message. She paused and continued. No, to be precise, this body belongs to your son-in-law. Can't you guys have some basic respect for mountain ghosts? I saved your son-in-law and the eldest son of your old master. Is this how you treat your savior? Wei Yong sneered. He was most annoyed by the talk of gods and ghosts. Lucky Emperor said calmly. I used to be a mountain ghost that cultivated in the mountains. Yesterday, I came out to play and found the demonic aura in the camp. Out of curiosity, I came to take a look. I didn't expect to witness such a good show. That man named Nie Yang gave your son-in-law an appearance-changing pill and used it to swap their appearances. Now, Nie Yang has openly taken the position of your son-in-law, and your son-in-law has taken the blame for him. Do you have proof? Lucky Emperor said stubbornly. I don't have any evidence, but you can kill me. I only hope that you can remain calm when you see your son-in-law die under your sword. I'm a spirit of the mountains, shapeless and formless. If this body dies, at most my soul will leave, but your son-in-law won't be so lucky. After listening for a while, Fan Chen was confused at first, then shocked. You're really a spirit? Lucky Emperor said according to Jiang Pingji's remote guidance. You're really forgetful. Wasn't the demon Empress before Zhongzhao was destroyed a wooden figure? Even an ambitious spirit can run to become an empress. Why can't a well-behaved mountain ghost come out and do good deeds? The news that the demon Empress was a wooden puppet spread like wildfire among the people. Many people thought that it was just a rumor, but Wei Yong, Fan Chen, and the others had their own sources of information. The demon Empress had indeed turned from a living person to a wooden puppet in front of everyone. Lucky Emperor forced himself to calm down and continued to repeat Jiang Pingji's words. I'm really unlucky. It's so good to stay in the mountains and cultivate. It's rare for me to come out, but I encounter such a terrible thing. I'm even involved in the battle of the feudal lords. If I'm not careful, I'll be stained with endless karma. She looked like she had nothing to lose and said to Wei Yong fearlessly. The Nie Yang you mentioned seems to be in cahoots with the demons of the evil path. I don't know where he got the appearance-changing pill. There's no proof. As long as the person dies, the effect of the appearance-changing pill will disappear. Do you want to test it? Anyway, I'm not afraid of death. Your son-in-law only has one life. Wei Yong's hand that was holding the sword was trembling. His heart was wavering. Did you leave those words just now? I asked Nie Qing, and he passed it on to me. Since you don't know whether to believe him or not, why not give him a chance to defend himself? Wei Yong asked again. Can he hear me? Lucky Emperor heaved a sigh of relief. The streamer was worth two people. It seemed that Wei Yong had been fooled. He can hear you. If you want to ask me anything, I can help you pass on the message. If what you said is true, I'll treat you as my benefactor. If there's any falsehood, you know what will happen to you. Lucky Emperor saw that Jiang Pingji had sent him another bullet screen. He was excited. Great. It just so happens that we mountain ghosts don't like to be involved with mortals, especially people who are involved with the world's major powers. I saved Nie Qing's life. Remember to give me a gift. We're done. Wei Yong's face darkened. He asked a few questions. For example, where did he become Nie Qing's disciple? What they talked about? What jokes Nie Yang made when he brought his son to be his disciple? What promises Nie Qing made when he married Wei Yong's eldest daughter? These were all private matters. Very few people knew about them. Even if Nie Yang and Nie Qing were close friends, it was impossible for him to know about these small matters. To prevent accidents, Wei Yong purposely set up traps. For example, he asked Nie Qing what books were placed on the bookshelf in the southwest corner of his study. In reality, there were only a few zither and no bookshelves. Nie Qing answered one by one, and Lucky Emperor passed on the information. The more Wei Yong asked, the more frightened he became. Fan Chen, who was beside him, paled. Do you believe me now? Lucky Emperor stabbed Wei Yong in the heart. You almost killed your son-in-law. Wei Yong used the tip of his sword to remove the thick rope that bound him. Lucky Emperor finally regained his freedom. I can only possess a mortal for 12 hours. After 12 hours, Nie Qing will regain control of the body. Fan Chen asked. Is there a way to remove the effects of the pill and let the young master regain his original appearance? Lucky Emperor shrugged. There's no way. I don't know either. If you can help the young master return, I will never forget your great kindness. How could Lucky Emperor know? When he was secretly anxious, Jiang Pengji pointed out the way for him. Since you're begging, there's a way. What way? You capture Nie Yang and give him to Lu Shi. Lu Shi's sword can slay all the demons in the world. That demon is currently possessing Nie Yang's body. Lucky Emperor said. As long as the demon helping Nie Yang is eliminated, the effects of the pill will naturally be removed. Of course, although I'm a mountain ghost, I've heard that mortals fight fiercely. Lu Shi is your mortal enemy. However, there are trade-offs in everything. Do you want Nie Yang to take over your nest and make Nie Qing unable to see the light for the rest of his life? Or do you want to endure the humiliation and let Lu Shi help you eliminate the demon? You choose. Wei Yong trembled and almost lost his footing. He said sarcastically, Is Lu Shi really the chosen one? All the demons in the world will help him succeed? Lucky Emperor was about to reply. Of course, when Jiang Pengji sent a bullet screen. It's hard to say. Whoever has the world in the end will be the chosen one. She laughed. I've already said that it's not easy for mountain ghosts to cultivate. They can't casually affect the change of emperors in the mortal world. How can a small mountain ghost bear such a huge karma? Believe it or not, it's up to you. Fanshan said, That's true. If mountain ghosts help Lu Shi, why would they save the young master? Chapter 15:13. Oh Huang said this with a fake smile. But deep down, she was very upset. She didn't understand. Wasn't it good for the myth streamer to damage the enemy's morale? Why did she reject it? Jiang Pengji's reason was simple. First, she had the strength to defeat the Nie family. There was no need to take this shortcut. Even if she won, it would not be honorable. Instead, she would be criticized as destiny. It sounded nice, but it was useless against those who were strong. How could she feel good if she said that she got her results by luck? Second, and this was also the most important reason, she wanted to take the opportunity to get rid of the system fragment. Other than the god-slaying sword in her hand, ordinary people could not deal with a spiritual life like the system. It was useless to kill Nie Yang. The system fragment would find a way to escape. If she missed this opportunity, it would be difficult to catch it in the future. To put it bluntly, this thing was a pile of sh*t. It would always jump out to annoy her when she didn't expect it. Killing it would solve the problem once and for all. Jiang Pengji did not explain to Oh Huang. Oh Huang could not ask in front of Wei Yong and the others. She could only bury her doubts in her heart. At that moment, Nie Qing's voice sounded. She asked a question that caught her off guard. Didn't you just say that Lu Shi is your lord? Why did you change your mind? Are you someone sent by Lu Shi or are you a mountain ghost? With Jiang Pengji's help, Wei Yong was coaxed, but Nie Qing was not so easy to fool. She still remembered that Oh Huang had told her that Jiang Pengji was her lord. Since she called her lord, it was obvious that she had a point. Nie Qing said sternly, Don't lie to my father-in-law. Oh Huang was secretly sweating. He blamed himself for talking too much. It was not easy to smooth things over. Because Jiang Pengji could not hear the conversation between Nie Qing and Oh Huang, she could not help her. She could only rely on herself. Fortunately, she was quick-witted and thought of an excuse. Didn't I say that just to appease you? If my lord was really Lu Shi, would I help you? Haha. I should just cut my own throat and force your father-in-law to death. Then, your family would fall into endless internal strife. Nie Qing was stumped by her words. She said a little awkwardly, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I'm a magnanimous person. This little misunderstanding is nothing. Lucky Emperor heaved a sigh of relief and said nonchalantly, But you, brother, I feel that you have a big problem. You are so pure and kind while Lu Shi is full of ink from head to toe. You will be at a disadvantage. Nie Qing didn't understand what covered in ink from head to toe meant, but he could relate it to the fact that Lucky Emperor said he was pure and kind. For a moment he thought of Nie Yang, and his mood sank again. Being kind was not a bad habit, But Nie Qing had to admit that his kindness was untimely. Not only would he get himself killed, but he would also implicate the people around him. This time, he was lucky enough to run into the mountain ghost, and his father-in-law did not kill him. If he were to fall into the same trap again, would he still be so lucky? Nie Qing's talent was not bad. It was just that he usually liked to think in a positive direction. After this experience, he should have truly matured. It's not a bad thing to be kind. If you were in a peaceful era, you would have made friends all over the world. But it's a chaotic world now. Your father is gone, and no one can shelter you from the wind and rain. You can't continue being so pure. Lu Shi is too black-hearted. He's full of schemes. If you don't work hard, how can you protect your father's hard work? Nie Qing revealed a bitter smile. Thank you for your guidance, fairy. Lucky Emperor was stunned. He could not help but hug his head in frustration. She was on the streamer's side. Why would she comfort the leader of the opposing camp? Would the streamer expel her as a fan if she knew? Jiang Pingji did not know. And even if she did, she would not say anything. After all, the salted fishes were there to have fun and experience transmigration, not to be her subordinate and work for her. Jiang Pingji could not restrict the salted fish's preferences and choices. She would choose to respect them. Lucky Emperor comforted Nie Qing, which showed that he was a kind and simple salted fish. After settling Nie Qing, Lucky Emperor said, "Don't you need to send people to chase the Real Nie Yang?" Wei Ming said, "There's no rush. The spiritual support team is not fast. They can catch up in a day." Since that was the case, Lucky Emperor was not in a hurry. Just as she did not know what to say, Jiang Pingji reminded her to take advantage of Wei Ming. "I helped you and saved Nie Qing's life. The deal is done. Thank you for your patronage." Wei Ming maintained his poise. "Just tell me what you like, fairy. We will definitely give it to you." "Haha, I like forthright people like you. My anxiety today was not in vain. I was afraid that I would turn into a box the moment I landed. If not for her quick-wittedness, coupled with the system's notification and Nie Qing's assistance, she would definitely be dead. Now that the danger was averted, she would not be able to live up to her anxiety if she did not extort more good things. Lucky Emperor's first reaction was accessories. Headwear. "I want a set of headwear. I heard that Lu Shi sent a set of headwear for women. Is it still there? I want that." Wei Ming and Fan Chen's expressions were a little ugly. Even though Nie Liang had cleverly resolved the humiliation of sending a headwear for women, he was not happy to mention it. Lucky Emperor just had to rub salt into his wound. "I burned it as a sacrifice." Wei Ming's tone was slightly cold. "What a waste of God's gift," Lucky Emperor said. "Then find a similar set. What a bunch of wastrels. Did they not know how expensive the set of gifts given by the host was? A tycoon offered 10 million, but refused to sell it. Although it was a military camp, there were many spoils of war. If one looked carefully, one could find gold, silver, and jewelry. Wei Ming sent someone to search for a box for Lucky Emperor as a thank you gift. Naturally, Lucky Emperor wanted to accept all of them. However, the system reminded her that there was a weight and volume limit when she teleported back. If she exceeded the limit, she would be in trouble. Why is this happening? Lucky Emperor could not help but feel distressed. She wanted all of these treasures. They were the spoils of war that she had exchanged her life for. The system actually gave her an answer. The Dream of 1,000 Years event is not only to repay the audience's long-standing support, but also to correct history and ensure that the world does not collapse. If the experiencer takes too many items, it is very likely to cause a deviation in the historical timeline. Please understand. Lucky Emperor expressed her understanding towards this explanation. It was a pleasant surprise that she had gained something this time. She was not a greedy person, so she quickly calmed down. She endured the pain of picking and choosing. As far as the system allowed, she chose what she thought was the prettiest, the most favorite, and the most valuable. Nie Qing could not stand it anymore. He said, "These are the thank you gifts from father-in-law. Fairy, you can take all of them." "You don't understand. This is called an equivalent exchange. I can only receive what I give." Lucky Emperor's face was full of tears, but she still had to maintain the posture of an expert. She said earnestly, "Your life is only worth this little money. I can't take more, or I will suffer retribution. Nieching was speechless. Chapter 15:14. Huang rebuked Nieching, and his gloomy mood was finally lifted. However, the surrounding salted fishes were rather curious about how she was being picky and not accepting all of them. Why didn't she take everything Wei Dan gave her? It was a big box of jewelry, and there were at least 100 of them. In the end, the salted fish Huang sat on the ground and picked the lighter, expensive and good-looking ones to put aside. There were about 10 of them. Jiang Pingji frowned and realized that things were not so simple. Looking at Huang's reaction, she probably wanted to take all of them, but she chose a portion. Obviously, there was a system restriction. Jiang Pingji asked her old chief, who was also online. You Abba. Jiang Xiaojiao, have you ever sent a parcel before? Jiang Pingji said. What kind of person do you think I am? Who hasn't used Interstellar Express in this era? You Abba. Express delivery is also about the most important thing, and the continuation of the wait. In layman's terms, Dream of 1,000 Years was the most important thing, including the transportation and the return ticket. More than that, there was an additional price to pay for the continuation of the wait, which ordinary people could not afford. Besides that, another important reason was the butterfly effect. If too many items were taken away, it would cause a serious deviation in history. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, You know the system's tricks very well, old chief. You Abba. Because I have one here. Although it has some problems with its brain, it is obedient. Jiang Pingji. Although it was called a system, it was actually one of the spiritual beings. Her old chief actually had one? Jiang Pingji could not help but ask. Previously, you said that you got a new job after retiring. Is it convenient for you to tell me about the nature of the job? You Abba. It's a job. To put it bluntly, I just work for others. The only advantage is that I can travel at public expense and get reimbursed in full. I can see many interesting people and things. Although the place I travel to is poor and backward, the pay is good, so I bear with it. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, What you said is true, but you didn't say anything. You don't have to be so guarded against me, do you? Was there any difference between what she said and what she didn't say? You Abba. I have to be guarded against you. Everyone in the 7th Corps knew that Jiang Pingji was a thorn. They had to be careful when talking to her, lest they be exposed. Jiang Pingji rubbed her chin. She had a feeling that her old chief was hiding something. However, Jiang Pingji couldn't force her to speak if she didn't want to. She wouldn't harm her anyway. From the new system to the appearance of the old chief, Jiang Pingji vaguely sensed something, but her guess had yet to be confirmed. Your Abba. Due to the confidentiality agreement we signed in the past, there are some things that you won't be able to find out even if you want to because I can't tell you. The only thing that could be revealed was that the human alliance was relying on this piece of land to revitalize the overall situation. Jiang Pingji was dumbfounded. She then thought of the few subsystems that she had killed. The system was the former heavenly brain that had a grudge against the Federation. From the looks of it, the burden on his shoulders was quite heavy. However, it sounded a bit exaggerated to say that the entire human alliance was counting on her to save the situation. Your Abba. Oh, this is not an exaggeration at all. You will know in the future. Jiang Pingji was kept in suspense, and her heart was itching. It was fine if she didn't know that there was such a secret, but the old general told her that there was a secret, but refused to tell her the content. This was too much. Old chief, do you know of a genre of online novels called fast travel? Jiang Pingji was about to probe further, when the old chief's meat bun profile picture immediately darkened. Your friend, your Abba, has gone offline. Jiang Pingji was speechless. She seemed to know something. Old chief, you've fallen. She rubbed her forehead, feeling a headache coming on. The first half of her life was quite normal, but after her transmigration, all sorts of monsters and demons appeared. However, now is not the time to complain about this. The most important thing is to solve this system fragment. Although the system was not a good thing, its existence was simply a bug. It would be better to solve it as soon as possible. On the other side, Wei Yong and the others did not dare to take even half a step away from Oh Huang. You guys are staring at me like this. I feel like I'm a prisoner. Oh Huang could not help but complain to Nie Qing about the behavior of Wei Yong and the others. If she was given 2 sticks, she could simulate tears in prison. Nie Qing's mood had recovered a lot, and the fatigue in her smile was not as strong. Hearing Oh Huang's willful and unguarded words, she could not help but smile. Father-in-law and the others will not be able to dispel their suspicions with just a few words. You said that you only possessed this body for 12 hours, but they may not believe you completely. If we don't keep an eye on you, it is hard to guarantee that no accidents will occur. Please forgive me, Fairy. Oh Huang glanced at the system countdown and hugged the precious box tightly. The jewelry in the box was precious, and the box used to contain them was carved from a whole piece of red sandalwood. It was extremely expensive. Seeing that the countdown was about to end, Oh Huang hesitated for a while and left a message for Nie Qing. I can't understand people like you who see glory and responsibility as more important than the heavens. Compared to you, I am more like a layman. I only know that living is more important than anything else. Only when you are alive can you create hope and opportunities for the future. If you die, you have nothing. Brother Nie Qing, take care. Nie Qing did not understand, but he smiled and thanked her. After a while, he felt his entire body sink. What happened? Nie Qing had just opened his mouth when he heard Nie Yang's voice. He raised his hand and was shocked to find that he could control his body. Only then did he understand that the fairy had left. Nie Qing could not help but look at Wei Yong and Fan Shen. The two had different reactions, but their eyes were filled with worry, and they could not help but redden. Wei Yong called out tentatively, "Young master?" Nie Qing choked with sobs. "Father-in-law." Fan Shen could not help but rub his eyes, saying in shock, "That really was a fairy." When Oh Huang left, the box she was hugging also disappeared. Wei Yong and Fan Shen saw this scene with their own eyes. Only now did they completely believe Oh Huang's words. Nie Qing took a deep breath and said, "The most important thing now is to quickly get Nie Yang back and swap identities." Now that Nie Qing was using Nie Yang's appearance, other than Wei Yong and Fan Shen, the other officials would not believe him. If Nie Yang made a false accusation at a critical moment, not only would Nie Qing's life be in danger, the two elders would also be implicated. In terms of ruthlessness, Nie Qing was far from being Nie Yang's match. Chapter 15:15. Wei Yong said, "Young master, don't be anxious. Young master should not appear in this matter." Nie Qing asked, "Why?" He wanted to personally ask Nie Yang why he treated him this way. How had Nie Qing wronged Nie Yang in the slightest? Were there many years of brotherly love all fake? Wei Yong said, "According to what that mountain ghost said, Nie Yang has the help of an evil demon. If you appear, how can the evil demon not guess our intentions? I'm afraid we'll alert the enemy. When this old subject captures Nie Yang, there's still time for young master to say or ask anything." Nie Qing said in shame, "This is the son-in-law's fault. I didn't think of this." Wei Yong said, "After experiencing this, young master should understand that a person's heart is hard to predict. Nie Yang, take this as a lesson." Nie Qing thought of something, his face pale as he said, "Father's poison was really done by him." Wei Yong said, "Before the late master died, he sent someone to find a bottle of poison in Nie Yang's study. This poison was the same as the late master's. However, this alone is not enough to convict Nie Yang. After that, the evidence of Nie Yang's scheme to murder young master can be considered irrefutable." Nie Qing's eyes were as red as a rabbit's, tears rolling down his face. "In that case, it was I who killed father," Wei Yong said. Even the late master and this old subject were deceived by Nie Yang, much less the inexperienced young master at that time. This matter could not be blamed on Nie Qing. It could only be blamed on the vicious and merciless Nie Yang. Because they had to support the spirit, Nie Yang and the others did not walk quickly. The men sent by Wei Yong and Wei Yong caught up not long after the sky turned dark. Nie Yang pretended to be surprised. "What happened?" The messenger said in panic. "Reporting to Lord," something big happened in the camp. At noon, military advisor Wei and registrar Fan died one after the other. Even though Nie Yang had been mentally prepared, he was still shocked speechless by this news. However, the people who died were father-in-law and father's important officials. Nie Yang was now using Nie Qing's identity and could not remain indifferent. He cried saying, "Father-in-law and the others are more than that. Father is gone, they don't want to live anymore." Nie Yang's acting was obviously at the level of a best actor. He cried at the drop of a hat and acted with sincerity, like another Nie Qing. Wei Yong and Fan Chun sacrificed themselves for their masters was a major event. Nie Yang took the initiative to meet the messenger and did not bring many people with him. The messenger was Wei Yong's trusted subordinate. In order not to arouse Nie Yang's and Yao Xie's suspicions, the messenger did not know that Wei Yong and the others were fine. He even thought that the two of them had really committed suicide for their master. Before sacrificing himself for his master, Wei Yong had left a secret suicide note for Nie Qing. Since it was a confidential matter, he naturally had to dismiss his subordinates and hand it over to them alone. Although Nie Yang was shrewd, Wei Dan was also a wily old fox. In the end, Nie Yang was still one step behind. "You did." Nie Yang opened the letter. Just as he was about to read it, Wei Yong's confidant suddenly rushed forward, covered his mouth and subdued him. At this time, a body double that looked very similar to Nie Qing changed into morning clothes and a bamboo hat, switching identities with Nie Yang. "Tie him up and gag him." Just as Nie Yang was about to struggle, several people pounced on him and tied him up. They put a bag as tall as a person and carried him away. The body double continued to carry Nie Yang's spirit to Bianzhou. Nie Yang struggled for a while, but realized that it was all in vain, so he simply gave up. "System, what's going on?" The system was silent for a long time before it spoke. "There are two possibilities. Either Nie Qing is dead, and Wei Yong did not sacrifice himself for his master, and instead endured the pain to avenge his son-in-law. Or, Nie Qing and Wei Yong are not dead, and your plan has already been exposed by them, and they are now going to capture you and interrogate you." Nie Yang's mouth was stuffed with a piece of cloth, and his entire body was curled up in the sack. "You're saying, Nie Qing and Wei Yong have already seen through our plan?" The system said. "Yes, it looks like. I've underestimated these ordinary people." Nie Yang's breathing quickened. The sack was stuffy and hot. He had been placed on the back of a horse, and his internal organs were about to shift. "Aren't you very powerful? Is there no way to fix this?" The system was also very angry. This was originally a trap to kill Nie Qing, but it did not expect its host to lose his life. Although Nie Yang was somewhat annoying and had secretly tried to resist it, the system was still satisfied with Nie Yang. "There's nothing I can do now. So what if Nie Yang could escape this time? He would lose his noble identity and status, and he would have to conceal his identity and hide in the future. The already weak emperor's energy in Nie Yang's body would dissipate completely. To the system he was useless. The only use he had was for it to continue to absorb the last bit of emperor's energy. In fact, as one of the candidates to possess emperor's energy, Nie Yang's emperor's energy was no weaker than Jiang Pengji's at the beginning. If not for Nie Yang's rise and the system's interference, Nie Yang would have become the ruler of the Nie family, and the emperor's energy would have become stronger and stronger along with his status. Who knew that Nie Yang, who should have been content with his lot, would rise and take away Nie Yang's emperor's energy? The other part of the emperor's energy was stolen by the dormant system bit by bit. Nie Yang's luck was getting worse and worse, and now he was in a dead end. Nie Yang chuckled. "Are you going to give up on me?" The system said. "It's not that I want to give up on you. It's that you're too disappointing." Nie Yang said sarcastically. "Then why aren't you leaving?" The system said. "We've known each other for a while. No matter what, I have to send you on your last journey." In fact, the system was unwilling to leave only because it was greedy. After all, Nie Yang still had some emperor's energy on him. It couldn't waste it. When Wei Yong and the other two saw the battered and exhausted Nie Yang, they felt very conflicted. Nie Qing squatted down and removed the cloth from his mouth. He asked coldly, "Why did you do this?" Nie Young didn't struggle, and he couldn't be bothered to quibble on his behalf. He simply told the truth. Because of power. When you poisoned my father, at that time, was he in your way? How could you be so heartless? Nie Qing's chest burned with rage. He grabbed Nie Yang's collar with both hands and lifted him up. His gaze was ferocious. Nie Yang didn't look him in the eye. He turned his head and said, "It's only a matter of time. He who strikes first gains the upper hand." Nie Qing was so angry that his vision turned black and his molars chattered. He almost couldn't resist the urge to strangle Nie Yang. The so-called brotherly respect is also for the sake of this scheme? You treat me very well. I'm very grateful. Nie Yang's eyes darkened. He said in a low voice, "However, you only gave me 1% of what you have. What I want is 1,000% more than what you have. I didn't want to harm you. But who asked you to block my way?" Nie Qing, ask yourself, is your personality really suitable to be a duke? Pure, weak, naive. The Nie family will only walk towards destruction in your hands. As a descendant of the Nie family, if you can sit in this position, why can't I? Everything Nie Yang had was given to him by the Nie family. He didn't fight for it himself. Nie Yang didn't feel guilty taking it for himself. Chapter 15-16. You want power. Why didn't you say so? Why didn't you say so? Nie Qing lost his usual elegance and calmness, his eyes bloodshot as he choked. If you had just a little bit of trust in me, just a little bit of honesty, I would have done my best to help you. What you want, and what I have, I will do my best to give it to you. Nie Yang, when have I ever owed you anything? But why did you take my father away from me? Nie Qing was on the verge of breaking down. Everyone was moved. Even the cold-hearted Nie Yang didn't know how to retort. Because he knew that what Nie Qing had just said was true. What you want? Why didn't you say so? Why did you have to kill my father? Why? Nie Yang's expression darkened, his bloodied lips quivering, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't. Facing Nie Qing's questioning, even if Nie Yang was so heartless, he felt a heavy stone in his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. The system sneered. Are you touched? You actually believed his words. If Nie Yang didn't die, how could Nie Qing have power? Nie Qing's words were just to lie to you. If Nie Yang didn't die, he wouldn't have just sat back and watched his precious son assist you. Why was it so hard to let go of power, once you picked it up? It wasn't just because power was attractive. It was also because power could protect oneself. For example, if Nie Qing convinced his father, Nie Yang, to gradually give power to Nie Yang, then wouldn't Nie Qing be worried that Nie Yang would harm him after he gained power? According to Nie Yang's temper, it was rare for him to get rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. Losing power was equivalent to taking off all the armor, exposing the defenseless soft meat in front of the enemy. Nie Yang laughed bitterly. Whether it was fake or sincere, at least he could say that. No matter what, he's sincere now. Nie Qing treated him sincerely, but this little bit of kindness couldn't stop Nie Yang from pursuing power. Just kill me, there's nothing else to say. Nie Yang said hoarsely. I poisoned Nie Yang, I admit it. Nie Qing thought Nie Yang would quibble for him. He didn't expect him to admit it so directly. He pointed at Nie Yang's heart and enunciated each word clearly. Is power really that attractive in your eyes? Nie Yang said indifferently. Isn't the purpose of a person's life to live a better life? Nie Qing had to admit that Nie Yang's words were correct, but he could not accept the methods Nie Yang used to pursue power. He relied on viciousness to get to this point, annihilating his conscience as a human. Even if he were to rule over the world, he was just a tyrant that others would turn pale at the mention of. Nie Yang. Nie Qing's breathing was heavy. Her tears had long since stopped, but the redness in her eyes was even more frightening than before. She grabbed Nie Yang's collar and pulled him closer to her. Her clear eyes were filled with viciousness as she gritted her teeth and said, I sever all ties with you, and we will not meet again on the road to the Yellow Springs. Nie Yang forced a smile and said, Of course we won't meet. If I travel faster, I might be able to see Duke Guangshan. When Wei Yong and Fan Chun heard this, their expressions changed drastically. In a rage, Nie Qing kicked the tied-up Nie Yang to the ground. Nie Yang rubbed the side of his face on the ground, his cheeks bleeding from the grit. He smiled and bent his waist, his knees curling on the ground as he used the force to sit up. He looked at Nie Qing out of the corner of his eye, and said with some pity, "Does elder brother know that Duke Guangshan passed away yesterday at the Cho hour?" Even though Wei Yong and Fan Chun had ordered Nie Yang to shut up, he still finished speaking without fear of death. Yesterday the Cho hour? Nie Qing was somewhat confused as he turned to look at Wei Yong and Fan Chun. Father had passed 7 days ago. How could he have passed away yesterday at the Cho hour? Seeing this, Wei Yong knew he could not hide it and said directly, "Former Lord did pass away last night at the Cho hour. Previously, when he was about to enter the coffin, he choked and woke up. Former Lord ordered us to hide it and secretly make arrangements, which is why he did not tell everyone." Nie Qing said, "Father, hid it even from me?" Wei Dan glanced at Nie Yang with some difficulty. Nie Qing immediately felt sorrow in his heart. His already wounded heart received another blow. Fan Chun said, "Former Lord did this not because he did not trust Lord. In reality, former Lord planned to spread the news of Lord's death, to see if those ambitious fellows could sit still. Once these people are dealt with, Lord's future path will be smooth. Former Lord put a lot of thought into this." Nie Qing could not listen to anything. Looking at the situation, Wei Yong and Fan Chun must have worked together to hide his father in the last few days of his life, lying alone on his sickbed, waiting for death to come. Illness not only tortured the body, but also the mind. As a son, he felt suffocated at the thought. Father had no children to serve him before he passed away. Who knew how he felt? After a series of blows, he was no longer in the mood to care about Nie Yang. "Father-in-law Fan Chun, Nie Yang will be handed over to you." Nie Qing threw the sword at his waist to one side, saying weakly, "Follow the plan, do what needs to be done. Take him away from here. I don't want to see him again. I want to be alone." Nie Yang's eyes widened when he heard this. He asked, "Why not kill me yourself?" Nie Qing said without turning his head, "I don't want to dirty my hands." Wei Yong saw Nie Qing leave and sighed. If this matter can teach young lord to be ruthless, it's not too bad. He had someone put a large sack over Nie Yang's head and secretly sent him out of the camp. Nie Yang lay on the carriage in deep thought. The system asked him in surprise, "Is Nie Qing crazy? Does he want to let you go? Will you let the person who killed your father go?" Nie Yang asked sarcastically. He seemed to have guessed something. He closed his eyes to conserve his energy. Memories of the past quickly appeared in his mind. Happy, sad, angry, all sorts of things that made up his life. "I'm wearing Nie Qing's face now. Other than Wei Yong and a few others, no one will know that I'm an imposter. If I cause a ruckus in the camp and accidentally attract the attention of Nie Yang's old officials, Nie Qing won't be able to explain himself. Naturally, he has to be executed secretly." The system was still the system. Even though it was very capable, it was too arrogant. It did not bother to figure out the thoughts of ants. This explanation was reasonable, so it did not continue asking. Nie Yang snorted coldly, and his lips curled into a sly smile. It was precisely because the system did not bother to figure out the thoughts of ants that it was destined to fail. What kind of personality did Nie Qing have? He would rather something happen to him than let the Nie family fall into chaos. If he did not have a way to return to his position, Nie Qing would not dare to touch him. Even if he killed his father, he would grit his teeth and endure it for now. After all, Nie Qing was too important to Niang. Nie Qing was ruthless enough to kill him. It was obvious that he had a way to restore his original appearance. Either he found an expert, or Nie Qing knew some secret, such as Nie Yang being possessed by a demon. Killing Nie Yang was easy, but getting rid of this demon was very difficult. When Nie Yang guessed this, the image of Jiang Pingji's posture on the battlefield suddenly appeared in his mind. If he was right, Nie Qing planned to get rid of him and the system together. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.